Good evening. Welcome to the April 10th, 2023 Troy City Council meeting. First up, before we actually begin, I understand there was some concerns with some people signing up for public comment this evening. There are now 6 people on my list, but you might want to go and double check and make sure. Actually, I'll tell you who's on there. Tony Kappas is on and Greg Schaff for the public hearing. For public comment for items on the agenda from Troy residents and businesses, we have Peter Dungeon, Bill Rose, Mark Kelly, and Roy Ream. If there was anybody else who had signed up or intended to sign up, please go ahead and head back to the kiosk, and our IT director is there to make sure that that'll happen, okay? All right. We're honored this evening to have Reverend James Hubeck from the St. Anastasia Catholic Church provide our invocation. So I'll call Reverend Hubeck forward, and please rise for that invocation and remain standing.
Thank you, Mayor Baker, members of the council. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. God, we thank you for the gift of this time. You give it to us each year to renew our hearts, to fill us with great joy. We thank you for this beautiful city of Troy that you give into our care. We ask you to fill our hearts with joy this evening as we come to consider the great needs of the city and how we may best serve the people entrusted to our care in whatever way you call us to serve. We ask this in the holy name of Jesus. Amen. Amen. The Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, we'll call the April 10th, 2023 Troy City Council meeting to order, and I'll ask for the roll call from Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Baker?
Here.
Councilmember Abraham?
Here.
Councilmember Brooks?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Krenga?
Here.
Councilmember Erickson Galt?
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Here.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Here.
All present this evening. First up on the agenda, certificates of recognition and special presentations. We have 2 this evening. I'll start with C1, which is a proclamation to celebrate Walsh College and their 100 years. So I will be joined by Dr. Suzanne Siegel, who's the current president and CEO from the Walsh College. Yeah, meet me down here, Susie. So full disclaimer, 100 years, it's a lot in a proclamation. So we'll do our best to get through this, but it's important. So it is our honor to give this official proclamation to celebrate Walsh College's 100 years, which were 1922 to 2022. So I'm going to read this into the record. It's a good story. Whereas Mervyn Walsh left his job at Thomas Edison's accountant to buy a franchise to teach the PACE method of accounting, he opened the Walsh Institute in Detroit's Capitol Theater on September 18, 1922. He knew that he could prepare students for successful careers by combining academic excellence and real-world experience. 23 students enrolled, and tuition was $60. And whereas Edgar Wheeler became the first graduate of Walsh Institute in 1926, in 1928, enrollment reached 286 students, and 7 graduates organized the Walsh Institute Alumni Association. Alumna Grace Dimmer became Michigan's first woman to earn the CPA designation in 1930. And whereas Walsh Institute marked its 25th anniversary in 1947, and enrollment reached 1,508, in large part due to the GI Bill of Rights. In 1965, William C. Stewart became the Institute's president on the retirement of Mervyn Walsh. Walsh trustees determined that the Walsh Institute would change its educational charter by having its own building, offering an accounting curriculum approved by the State Board of Accountancy and receiving State Board of Education approval. And whereas Walsh Institute was renamed Walsh College of Accountancy and Business Administration, an upper division college offering coursework for juniors and seniors who have finished 2 years at community colleges and 4-year institutions. Walsh purchased 20 acres of farmland from Morris Waddles for a new location in Troy, and in 1969, ground was broken for a new 10,000 square foot location in Troy, which opened in 1970. And whereas in 1974, Walsh offered its first graduate degree, a Master of Science in Taxation, a 7,400 square foot addition to the Troy location tripled the size of the library and added 2 lecture halls, a bookstore, and a student lounge. A $4.2 million addition to the Troy location is completed in 1990 and included a cafeteria, computer lab, and faculty and administrative space. In 1998, Walsh opened a location in Novi, launched an MBA degree, and offered its first online courses. And whereas in 2006, a Doctor of Management and Executive Leadership, the first doctoral degree, is offered, and they broke ground for a 36,000 square foot, two-story addition named for Walsh President Emeritus Jeffrey Berry. In 2013, an award-winning 1,400 square foot finance lab opens for students with 12 Bloomberg terminals, large flat-screen televisions tuned to market and financial reports, and breakout rooms where students can examine current market conditions, trends, and discuss future projections. Walsh holds its 100th commencement ceremony. And whereas in six of the graduate degree programs at Walsh College in Troy have been recognized nationally by onlinemastersdegree.org, including a #1 online nationwide ranking for its Master of Science in Data Analytics program. Other honors include Master of Science in Taxation, #3 online nationwide, Master of Business Administration, #6 online in Michigan, Master of Marketing, #15 online nationwide, #13 most affordable online nationwide, Master of Science in Information Technology, #18 online nationwide, and Master of Science in Finance, #20 online nationwide. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Mayor and City Council of the City of Troy hereby congratulate Walsh College on their 100th anniversary and commend its 9 presidents: Mervyn Walsh, William C. Stewart, Jeffrey W. Berry, David A. Spencer, Keith A. Priddy, Stephanie W. Bergeron, Marcia Kelleher, Michael Levins, and Susie Siegel for their leadership and dedication, and be it further resolved that the Mayor, City Council, and City Management join the citizens of this community in celebration of the 100th anniversary of Walsh College, and the quality of and value of their degree programs, dedication of their faculty, staff, and students who work hard every day to make a positive impact in the world, and look forward to it being part of Troy for many more years to come. So this proclamation is presented this 10th day of April, 2023. It's signed by myself, Susie, as the mayor. All members of our Troy City Council have signed it. I present it to you, Susie, and thank you so much for having such a wonderful institution here in our city. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Baker. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Speak into the mic.
I can speak. I won't say a couple words. This isn't the Emmys. You won't have to play music to get me off the stage. Maybe. I don't know. Thank you, everyone. I don't know how many Walsh College alumni, friends, anybody. Okay, there we go. Alumni? Woo, very good. All right there. Alumni, what program? Sorry, I can't get away from the mic. One of the masters. Okay, very, very good. Thank you so much. We're so proud to be Walsh College, and I'm so proud to have this position, and thank you so much for the support of the City Council. We really are excited to be Metro Detroit's Business and Technology College, and we're going to be here for another 100+ years. So thank you very much, everyone. This is so greatly appreciated. Thank you.
All right. C2 is a legislative update by State Representative Sharon McDonald, who I saw in the back. Come on up, Sharon. Excuse me, Representative McDonald.
Good evening, Mayor Baker, City Council members, city staff, and people of Troy. Thank you so much for allowing me to spend a few moments with you today with my first legislative update. For those of you who don't know me, I am State Representative Sharon McDonald. I've lived in Troy for 18 years and in my district for nearly 30 years. I was elected to the new District 56 last fall and took office on January 11th of this year. Hey, Dave. I'm going to quickly introduce my office. My office staff includes my legislative aide, constituents lead and longtime Troy mom, Kelly Jones, who is not here. She's coming, but she'll miss this. That's good. She can't give me notes afterwards. So far, she has led our office in helping nearly 1,500 constituents. Their concerns range from sharing ideas about upcoming votes to losing their electrical power to needing help to sign up for unemployment insurance. Our constituents in District 56 can contact our office for assistance at 517-373-2617 or by emailing us at sharonmcdonald@house.mi.gov. Also on my staff is my legislative director, Matt Dargay, who came and spoke briefly at this meeting last month. He helps me with all things policy and taking our legislative ideas from a blank sheet of paper to being signed on the governor's desk. Now on to the update. In my first 100 years, I've attended or hosted 26 events. I have also sponsored or co-sponsored 85 bills and 10 resolutions. So I'll just share some of the highlights. I'm proud to say that I passed my first resolution in January to honor members of Michigan's local school boards. Our schools have had a rough few years through COVID closures and politicization of everything from masks to books, and they deserve a great deal of appreciation, I think, for a difficult and often thankless work that they do for our children. One of my bills, House Bill 4139, is part of the new safe storage package in Michigan. It recently passed the House and is moving forward. The aim of that package is to require safe storage of firearms in homes only when children are present. So it is for homes with children in them and homes when children are visiting. When it's passed, this law will save lives. The House has also passed a bill that will require universal background checks for anyone purchasing a firearm. And you probably know that we've also passed and the governor has signed legislation that will roll back retirement taxes. We've repealed anti-labor laws that were passed by the Snyder administration more than a decade ago. And that's some of the things we have completed, we have been doing. There's also another thing called Justice for Allie, is kind of a nickname for a bill that we have been working on. Actually, I am the third state rep to work on this. Martin Howrlack has worked on it, as has former Rep. Padma Kupa, and now it's my turn, and I may be lucky to get it across the finish line. This is regarding a vulnerable adult protections. We're continuing to work with stakeholders in law enforcement and disability rights to fashion as strong a bill as possible. The legislation is in really good shape, and we're hopeful that its committee hearing will be scheduled soon, probably in the next few weeks. I also vow to seek ways to hold our utility companies responsible for long power outages. The failure to get our electricity up and running after recent ice storms was really disastrous, and it's really time that we put the sufficient amount of pressure we need to put on our utility companies to make our power more reliable here in Michigan. I'm sure most of you feel that way as well. I'm working on many bills for the future as well, and an issue that's important to many people in District 56, especially in Troy, is the noise coming from I-75 since the recent construction there. This is a challenge that my predecessors and I have been trying to solve over the last few years. Former State Representative Padma Kupa and State Senator Mallory McMorrow were able to earmark $300,000 for a sound study that took place last fall. And there has been action on that, and there's been a lot of meetings. I've been talking with the I-75 noise mitigation group since December, and I plan to be in attendance tomorrow, if I can get out of Lansing soon enough, to be part of the presentation by MDOT of the results of that study. Should the report find that some of the areas along I-95 are now eligible for new sound walls, I will then work with Lansing legislators to find more money for their construction. Rep. Kupa and Senator McMorrow also raised $4 million a few years back toward designing and constructing those walls. Tomorrow I will learn what needs to be done next. So I think that's a pretty good, brief, I hope, initial roundup of our activity in Lansing so far this term. It's only been 100 days. And if any of our constituents have questions or need of help, I want to repeat our contact information. The phone number is 517-373-2617, or you can email us at sharonmcdonnell@house.mi.gov. Thank you all for your attention, and I'm happy to take questions if you have any.
Thank you, Representative McDonald. Any questions from council? You have question or comment?
I just
Councilmember Hoderick?
wanted to point out the meeting tomorrow that you spoke of regarding I-75 is actually open to Troy residents as well. And correct me if I'm wrong, 6 o'clock at the community center, I believe?
I just heard 5:30
5:30,
at
thank
the
you.
community center, but thank you for saying that. Yes, it's open to everyone.
And thank you for picking up that baton that I hear from residents all over the city. We all do. And just frequenting Firefighters Park in the summer, you can really hear there's demonstrably an increase in sound. And our experience here and possibly policy adjustments can be made that could be impactful to communities everywhere. It's an issue that's bigger than just us, but we're giving
I'm sure.
voice to it. Residents, fellow residents in the community have really held that, taken up that mantle very professionally.
Absolutely.
And I want to express appreciation and thank you for sure that's obviously a priority, from meeting with them. And
Yes.
so appreciate you taking that on.
Yes. Thank you, Councilwoman Hoderick. It was fun to say that.
I just want to add I think the meeting is scheduled from 5:30 to 7:30. There'll be 2 separate presentations during that time period by MDOT. You don't need to be there the whole time.
Oh,
I
okay.
think there's an initial presentation at 5:45 and then a second one about an hour later, and they're taking questions throughout. So for residents that want to attend and can't attend, it's at the community center. I think it's in the 2 big rooms opened up. They're expecting a large turnout. And it's a long time coming, so I'm looking forward
Yes.
to having
I'm
that
hoping
opportunity.
for good results from that study that was funded by our friends, and thank you all very much.
Thank you. That concludes certificates of recognition and special presentations this evening. We have no carryover items, so that brings us to public hearings. We have one this evening. E1 is a public hearing. Preliminary site plan review, file number SP202-0027. Proposed estates at Eckford, one-family residential cluster, south side of Eckford, west of Rochester, parcels 88-20-15-252-036-037-037-004-005, section 15. Currently zoned R1C, one-family residential district, and that'll be introduced by our Community Development Director, Brett Sauer.
Good evening, Mayor Baker and City Council. Seems somewhat like deja vu. If you remember, not too long ago, March 20th, I was sitting in the same seat in the audience, and at about 20 to 8 in the evening during the meeting, the city clerk was thankfully texted me, and because we're holding a public hearing, we're supposed to be holding a public hearing for this very item, and Aileen texted me and said, no one signed up for this item. And I furiously ran to my office, did some research, talked to Aileen, and we determined that we had not provided proper notification, which is it's not a legal requirement for City Council, but it is our policy, and it has been the whole almost 21 years that I've worked here. So we recognized our error, and I think Council acted very promptly and appropriately, and we shut her down. We didn't take any action, and we provided it was, again, Planning Department error, no one else's. But they gave the Planning Department an opportunity to appropriately notify everyone. So I'm here. The point of all that diatribe was to clarify with you that we did properly notify the residents with ads in the paper and notification by mail to everyone within 300 feet. It's posted on the bulletin board. It's on the website. So everyone's been properly notified. So which is very important. I'm so thankful, Aileen. I thanked her about 10 times that we did not take action without giving the residents an opportunity to participate in this discussion. So thank you again, Aileen. So here we are with a properly notified general public for this public hearing. This public hearing is for a one-family cluster development referred to as the estates at Eckford. And so that we're all on the same page, council, residents, people watching on TV. I just thought it was appropriate to add a very small educational component because, what is a one-family cluster development? It's a zoning concept. It's used across the country, and it basically involves grouping together closely or clustering homes within a development so that the space that is preserved by clustering on the interior can be preserved outside around the perimeter of the development. It's a way of preserving open space. it preserves natural features, it permits creative design, and it reduces infrastructure costs. It is an option available to developers. It does require City Council approval at a public hearing following a Planning Commission public hearing where the Planning Commission considers the item and makes a recommendation. The minimum requirement for these developments is 20% open space, and by providing 20% open space, the developer can get compensatory density bonuses in order to encourage these types of development to preserve this open space. And density bonuses are based on a parallel plan, and that parallel plan is basically a layout of the site under the existing zoning district requirements. So let's talk about the estates at Eckford. In terms of background, the developer is Mondrian, and they were able to assemble 6 parcels totaling 7.6 acres. It's located at the southeast corner of Eckford and Tallman. To the far right of this, to the east on this drawing is Rochester Road. So it's a little bit west of Rochester Road on the south side of Eckford. The underlying zoning is R1C, one family residential, and the by right lot size for this district is minimum lot size of 10,500 square feet, minimum lot width of 85 feet. There are wetlands on this site. All the wetlands that the developer's engineers indicated are shown in green. They are state regulated, which means in order to fill or do anything with those wetlands, the developer has to get permission from the state of Michigan. The department that controls that is known as EGLE. I forget what it stands for. It used to be the MDEQ, now it's EGLE. To be considered a state-regulated wetland, it's any wetland that is contiguous to a lake, river, or stream, or within 500 feet of a lake, river, or stream. And if it meets that criteria, it's state-regulated. It can only be approved, reviewed, and approved by the state of Michigan. If it doesn't meet those criteria, it's considered non-regulated. Communities can regulate wetlands that are not regulated by the state if they have a wetland ordinance. Troy does not have a wetland ordinance. So if these were non-regulated, they could be filled in, and the only reviewing agency would be the city engineering department. But these are state regulated. So I indicated earlier, to determine how many units the developer qualifies for, they submit a parallel plan. And this is the parallel plan that was submitted. It yields 25 lots or 25 units. But you'll notice in the red X's on the screen here, these X's represent 5 lots that there's significant wetlands on the lots. So in theory, the developer could get permission from EGLE to fill all the wetlands on the property, but realistically, it seems more realistic, more appropriate that we pull those 5 lots off the parallel plan. So again, because it may not be realistic, and we didn't want to be disingenuous to the residents and the neighbors who are potentially affected by this, to sit in the audience and look at this and say, wait a minute, they're filling all the wetlands. This really isn't realistic. And that's I think it's a valid point. So if you take those 5 out, it yields 20 lots or 20 units. The developer in this instance is proposing 35% open space. So there's a commensurate number of units that are earned through open space. If there's 35% open space preservation, there's a 35% density bonus. So simple math that even I can understand. 20 lots, you multiply that by 1.35, that 35% bonus, it yields 27 lots. The applicant's proposing 26. So even if you're conservative, you pull those out and you only yield 20 in the parallel plan, it's still a reasonable number based on that parallel plan. Does that make sense to everybody? No. Oh, I thought it was. Okay. So the site plan is for 26 units. The lots range from 6,300 square feet to 9,723 square feet. Remember, I put a number up there earlier. 10,500 square feet is the minimum lot size in R1E if they're not clustering. But again, they're having smaller lots. They're clustering those potentially clustering those homes closer together and preserving open space around the perimeter. The average lot size is only a little over 7,000 square feet. And again, as a comparison, 10,500 is permitted by right. So in other words, if the applicant didn't pursue this and the city council decided that this was not a viable option, the applicant would potentially come back with minimum lot sizes of 10,500 square feet. Units 1 through 9 along Eckford Drive all have driveways on Eckford. And Unit 26 in the southwest corner has a driveway on Tallman. Again, the applicant proposes 35% open space. Most of this is along the south and along the eastern property lines, and they're preserving a significant wetland area, and they're proposing to fill this area right in here, as well as these smaller pockets on the site. They are proposing a trail that runs to meander through the property, and this trail would potentially connect with the development, another 26-unit cluster development to the north, and eventually go through the DPW property, through the PUD that was recently approved, and connect to Long Lake Road. The applicant seeks relief administratively, which is permitted through this option. The perimeter setback here is required to be equal to the rear yard setback in R1C, which is 43 feet, and this distance from here to here is only 32 feet. So they're only asking for one relief on one item. And I should note that the applicant proposes patios for all of these units. This, okay, trees. There are a lot of trees on this site. As you know, the developers are required to measure, tag, identify all trees at least 6 inches in diameter at breast height, which is basically, it's you take a caliper at breast height and you measure the diameter of it using that caliper. And there are 1,590 inches of landmark trees. Landmark trees are large, significant trees of good quality. There are 1,590 inches of landmark trees. The applicant's required to replace the inches cut down on a 1-per-1 ratio. So they cut down 1,590 inches. They are to replace 1,590 inches. There are also woodland trees. These are trees that are not as significant in terms of size and quality as the landmark trees, but they still have significant value. There are 1,530 inches of woodland trees. Those are required to be replaced at a 50% ratio, so half of those inches. The applicant is preserving 831 inches of landmark trees, and there's a 2-for-1 ratio credit for that. So they get credit for 1,662 inches. They're also proposing to preserve 911 inches of woodland trees, and they get, again, double the credit. So they're required to replace 2,355 inches. They're credited with preserving 3,484 inches, so there's no tree replacement required. And most of those trees that are being preserved are down here. It's in the green area, to the south and to the west. East, excuse me. Our traffic consultant, OHM, prepared a traffic memo to summarize the trips generated by this site. We look at trip generation in 2 ways. We look at AM and PM peaks. We look at the morning rush hour and the afternoon rush hour. The AM peak is a 1-hour period between 7 o'clock and 9 o'clock in the morning. The PM peak is a 1-hour period between 4 and 6 p.m. Our traffic consultant believes that the number of trips in and out in a 1-hour period will total 22, and in the afternoon peak hour, it'll be 28. So approximately one additional vehicle every 2 to 3 minutes will be generated by this during the AM and PM peak. Total trips in and out will be about 292 in a 24-hour period. The developer is proposing 3 different elevations: a ranch, a 1.5-story, and a 2-story, ranging in size from a little under 2,000 square feet to almost 3,000 square feet in area. These are the cluster standards for consideration for approval as set forth in section 10.04. Long-term protection and preservation of natural features, natural resources, and open space, innovative and creative site design, appropriate buffer and/or transitions, compatible mixture of open space, landscape areas, and/or pedestrian amenities, sustainable design features, et cetera. I'm not going to read all of them, but those are the standards that are in your packet that are for consideration. To summarize, for the 6 additional units proposed over the parallel plan that we've determined is 20 lots, they propose preservation of 35% open space, including protecting a relatively large wetland area, and proposing a 10-foot wide pedestrian trail that goes through the property. The Planning Commission considered this item at a public hearing on February 14th, 2023. They recommended approval 7-1. And I can answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Brent. My first question actually is there an expected presentation from the applicant this evening, or are they just here for questions if necessary?
I'm getting the nod from Mr. Epping that there's a presentation.
I will ask you a couple questions first. We'll ask for questions from you before we move on to that presentation. And if you think your questions might make more sense after the applicant has spoken and they might be cleared up, that's a good thing. But mine's specifically related to you and the city. I'm trying to wrap my head around something with our cluster ordinance that I feel like I should know by now, but I'm going to ask this question. If the minimum requirement is 20% for open space, does our ordinance differentiate between land that's already environmentally protected by another agency like the state in this versus what the applicant, him or herself, is proposing to keep?
No, it does not.
So they can get the full credit for land that's already protected?
Yes, that's a great question. It's not the first dialogue I've had informally with one of the board members here. No 2 cluster ordinances are the same. Every community regulates these differently. Some allow you to utilize protected wetlands, some do not. We took the tact of including protected wetlands in the calculation.
Okay, so I guess my question then is, and it's speculative and you probably won't answer, but if this cluster plan were not to pass and the developer wished to choose a parallel plan approach, one, as you've just stated, a fair parallel plan based on what we have now is only 20 units versus the 26. But is there any thoughts on, the likelihood of Eagle agreeing to allow those protected wetlands to be filled in? Is that something that's happened in other developments here in Troy recently, or do you know?
I don't know. What I can tell you is we got Scott Finley, the city engineer, forwarded an email to me today from Eagle indicating that they agree in concept with what's proposed. So the developer's engineer has been working, which is their right, at their risk, with Eagle to see if they would agree with this development if it were to be approved by City Council, and they seem to be okay. There's still some I's to be dotted and some T's to be crossed at this juncture, but they seem to agree in concept with what is proposed. Now, that was not filling everything.
That's just filling those small portions on a couple of those lots on the southern end.
Go back to your original question. I think that's why it's important, I think, to have a reasonable parallel plan, because you have the ability to utilize wetlands in the calculations. It's got to be realistic. Now, is it theoretically possible for a developer to fill every square inch of wetlands on the property? Absolutely. It is possible. It's got to be engineered, got to be approved by Eagle. It can't negatively impact neighboring properties, and there's a significant cost because you either have to mitigate somewhere else or you have to pay wetland credits, which are really expensive. So is it potentially possible? Yes. Is it realistic? Not so much.
Okay. Additional questions for Brent, or City Administration. Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Craig.
Thank you, Mayor. It's actually a clarification exactly on that point. So there was a lot of discussion in Planning Commission around the applicant potentially receiving these wetland credits. Well, if Eagle determines that these wetlands, these 5 lots on the parallel plan cannot be developed, does that mean they can't be developed? Or can you still, are you saying that with these wetland credits, there are potential ways to still do something?
So I want to be clear, the parallel plan was not considered for consideration for approval. The parallel plan was only submitted as a required piece of information to determine how many units are developable under the cluster.
Okay.
So it's not an either or this evening. What's before you this evening is a site plan for a one-family cluster of 26 units. The Eagle is not reviewing the parallel plan. That's for staff, the planning and engineering departments to look at. So I don't know if I'm answering your question,
No,
but
that's helpful.
let's play it forward. I'm just for conversation. We're just having a conversation here. It gets denied tonight for whatever reason. Playing it forward, the applicant would have the right to submit a by right development with the 10,500 square foot lots, and they could seek approval of a development with all the wetlands, but theoretically filled in or not. We don't have an application yet from the developer to make that determination. But if they did submit a plan that affected wetlands whatsoever, and given the location, some of those regulated wetlands are in the center of that, I would expect that they're going to have to do some filling. So they're going to have to, again, go back to Eagle with a different plan and seek approval from Eagle for that plan.
That's actually really helpful, Brent. Thank you. One other quick question, just with the parallel plan, to confirm with Lot 17, that no longer has a driveway on Tolman. Is that correct?
That is correct. The driveway's on the interior street.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions for Brent or City Administration?
I just had a quick question about the small unregulated wetlands and filling them. Is there any concerns or potential problems with even filling those smaller ones when you
From
develop over
a
them?
water table
Yeah, from
standpoint?
a water standpoint.
So those are, the plans, they're regulated. They're not unregulated.
The smaller.
Yeah, they're regulated.
Oh, those are regulated.
Yeah,
okay.
because they're within 500 feet, I assume because they're within 500 feet of this, which is contiguous to a Lake River stream, they're also regulated.
Okay, I see.
But that's a great question. The city engineering department, if this were to be approved as submitted, so we'll take the other approach, approved as submitted, approval would trigger the ability of the applicant to submit engineering drawings that shows drainage and all the utilities and all the engineering details. And they're obligated that this development does not negatively impact abutting properties. It's got to be engineered appropriately so that when they fill those wetlands, that water has to go someplace and it cannot negatively impact the neighbors.
Thank you.
Councilmember Abraham.
Following up on that question, there was a cluster development approved not too long ago just on the north side of Eckford, and a lot of the dialogue at that meeting and those public hearings related to some of the drainage issues that exist today. Understanding some of these details happen more with final site approval, not this at today's review. Can you comment on what is being done or what is being considered for the drainage? And has the situation on Eckford improved overall, I'll just say?
So I'm not a civil engineer, and I'm not even going to pretend to be one. I can only reiterate what I stated earlier, is that the developments cannot negatively impact abutting neighbors, but also the city engineers here this evening, they are involved from the time that an application is submitted, and it's circulated through City Hall for comments, and they make initial review comments. They're aware of it, and what we try to do is work with the developers when they put in like rear yard drains and they put in the infrastructure. If we can get the developer as part of the development to make an improvement that improves an existing negative drainage situation, we will, as long as we can justify it from, from an engineering standpoint. So we try to make improvements when we can, but again, that's the extent of my my comfort level for responding to your question. But Scott Finley is here this evening.
All right, and then second question, if I may. The proposed cluster plan has a trail going through it as part of a broader trail initiative. Should the cluster proposal before us tonight not get approved, is it still possible to do that trail in the way that's being conceptualized here?
I'd like to think so. But we're considering this application and we're not considering another application. So I guess we would cross that bridge when we came to it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Erickson Galt.
Thank you, Mayor. Regarding the traffic study, when we're doing this in a situation like this where we have a parallel plan, do we compare what would be the theoretical traffic difference between the two?
No.
Okay.
But the difference is, between 20 and 26 units is not a significant difference.
Okay. Do we know what the timeline for construction or completion of this plan would be? And I ask because I'm concerned with the Rochester Road project coming up here in a year or two and how those two might conflict.
That's a question for the developer. I don't know what their proposed timeline is.
Okay. That's all my questions.
Additional questions for staff at this point? I know several were submitted 3 weeks or whenever the last meeting was in anticipation as part of the public record. Does it make sense to have the applicant go ahead and speak? All right, he's waiting in the back.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council. My name is Jim Epping. I appreciate the opportunity to be before you again. I'm a land planner located in Clarkston, Michigan, and I'm representing tonight Joe Meniaci, certainly a longtime businessman, and his company Mondrian. Rather than go through a presentation, I really appreciate Mr. Sonovat and the detail that he's provided, as well as all your consultants and planning staff. I'd like to really, I had 5 points I wanted to cover, and your questions really kind of highlight all of those. So if you'll give me just a few minutes, I'll respond to those and then be available for any questions. What's interesting when I look at plans is really that comparison of not what is currently there in terms of an open field, but what is zoned versus what is being proposed. Certainly the property is zoned R1C, which allows, based on the parallel plan, and I think that's accurate, if we take off those 5 lots that have the X's through it, we'll agree with that, would allow really 20 lots, give or take, and I think 20 lots is reasonable, would fit on here per the current zoning. What we are proposing, using your ordinance, really not using anything that we said, hey, won't this be great, but using the City of Troy ordinance, the one-family cluster zoning, single-family cluster zoning option, which prescribes within the ordinance, again, a formula that would allow us to get up to 27 units, at least the planning staff is saying, and we're asking for one less than that, 26. Why I think that's important is if we imagine what anybody on any piece of property within Troy under R1C would be permitted to do, and that's really build, for lack of a better term, kind of wall to wall. Let's say that anybody's going to have to preserve those wetlands. Yes, we are entitled to go to Eagle. Yes, it's an expensive, long process, and yes, it may be possible, it may not be possible. So let's just take those off the table. Any R1C setting aside that preserved open space, would be able to build the appropriate R1C lot sizes, take them right up to the right-of-way at Eckford and over to Tallman and then back to the southern property line, and those lot lines would go right to the end, and presumably because of rear yard storm sewers and grading and everything else, it would essentially be clear cut, or any developer, certainly Joe and his team are top tier developers, everyone's going to seek to save as many trees as we can, but because the lots would be bigger, because they'd be pushed out to the edge to get the appropriate footage, a majority of the trees would be saved. And what we're really proud of, as Mr. Sonavent had pointed out, is we're preserving thousands and thousands of trees, both within the preserved wetland areas, but we're preserving about 2.65 acres. About half of that is wetlands, and about half of that is just open space, preserved natural areas. So roughly about 1.3 acres could be developed, but we're saying, hey, let's preserve that. And more importantly, we're saying let's preserve that on the southern side. And so along that southern property, along our neighbors to the south, we're preserving 87 feet of trees of undisturbed area. So what could be backyards and fences and playgrounds and porches and patios coming right up to that southern line, we're saying, let's back it up 87 feet. Let's create that natural buffer. It's a habitat. It's a beautiful woodlot area. It provides privacy to our future neighbors. It also provides preservation and privacy to the existing neighbors. And the city of Troy has done such a wonderful job of kind of creating this, as we'd say in Boston, this emerald necklace of open space that goes through the property. And so this is just a continuation of those clusters of habitat and of open space. And so that's our first point, is even setting aside the the preserved wetland, which theoretically could be filled. We're going to say, let's set that aside, but let's in addition double that and provide a very meaningful buffer, not just leftover open space, but that very meaningful buffer along the whole southern side. What that does is it preserves the trees, it preserves privacy, and so forth. We also then, and we've been here before, and Joe has built so many successful neighborhoods, is we take seriously your master plan. And your master plan, among many visions, really mandates or prescribes this idea of moderate size homes, moderate value homes for that missing middle, for the people that either want to move to Troy and aren't ready for that big home, or those people that have that big home and want to stay in Troy and move to a different lifestyle. And so once again, Mondrian is putting that vision into place, and we're saying let's create appropriately sized homes on appropriately sized lots. I was with another partner, and we were going through some math, and about 10 years ago, 1 linear foot of road cost about $400. In today's construction, 1 linear foot of road costs between $1,800 and $2,000. And so when I say, boy, I want to build an 85-foot wide lot, and let's say that it's double loaded home on each side, that means for every foot of home, I'm paying for half of that road. That's the way developers do it, right? Is they'll build the road, but then the home on either side pays $1,000 times 85 foot. Part of the cost of homes is not only the size of homes, but the size of lots. And so when we're able to build less road, and I'm able to build a 60 or 70 foot lot as opposed to an 85 foot lot, now I'm only, my linear footage is less, and I can divide that. So that immediately comes off the cost of the lot, which comes off the cost of the home. So when a city says, how do we build moderately priced homes? How do we create that missing middle? It's not only the size of the home, but it's the size of the infrastructure, the sewer, the sidewalk, the curb, the gutter, everything else. And so your cluster ordinance within your ordinance, enables us to do that. It enables us to deliver on that vision. So that's the second point, is delivering on that missing middle vision. Environmentally, besides saving the trees, besides creating this open space, we're participating in a regional stormwater program here in Troy. And there'll be about 3 different developments. I believe at least one, if not another, just to the north of us has already been approved. And unlike most developments throughout all communities where we have to create a detention pond on our site, wipe out more trees. The city of Troy has, I think very smartly, created this regional stormwater system in this area, and this development will participate in that, help pay for it, and take advantage of it. But the upside is, once again, that we're preserving trees and preserving that open space where we can put the path and those other things. In terms of amenities, we're really proud to continue. Every project we bring to you, we continue that trail system, and once again, we're doing that. We're having a 10-foot wide that goes through the open space that'll be staked to ensure that we preserve trees, but it's going to connect from the southwest to the northeast and continue really right from the dog park over on Livernois, and this trail system just keeps getting better and better, and this will be another link to that. Someone asked the question, if we weren't doing this cluster, would we be able to connect it? Again, if we're going to meet that maximum lot or minimum lot size under R1C, it would still connect, but it would really probably take the form of sidewalks. So that trail would come to our sidewalks, we'd put in the sidewalk. This way it's a nice natural running trail, a 10-foot wide safety path. And so I think under the cluster, it's easier for us to find space and provide that trail. We certainly would be part of, if we went with conventional zoning, we'd be part of that trail system, but it would take the form of sidewalks and still provide that connection, maybe not quite as much fun for people using it. And then the last point that I had was, again, taking advantage of or using your ordinance to deliver on your vision of the master plan. You guys came up with a master plan, and then you put an ordinance in place that helps deliver on that vision. We're really asking for, based on your ordinance, one less than is permitted, 26 instead of 20. So from a traffic point of view, the OHM did an independent study and said this whole neighborhood is going to generate about 292 cars per day. If we divide that by 26 and then we say, let's just look at the 6, how many, if we're all going to agree that this property could have 20, how much extra is 6? Well, six cars or 6 extra homes, according to the OHM, would add about 67 additional trips per day, or about less than 3, about 2.8 per hour. So when we're saying we're adding 6 additional homes than what might otherwise be permitted, we're talking about adding less than 3 additional car trips per day. So certainly more than is currently there, but not, from my point of view, overwhelming the system. So with that, Mr. Mayor, we've got, pictures to share, and we're proud of the architecture, of course, absolutely excited about the quality of the homes, but we appreciate the time.
Thank you. Questions from council for the applicant? Councilmember Brooks.
Thank you so much. Just a quick question. What do you anticipate the percentage of homes to be ranch-style homes?
We're really proud that it's up to the market. So we're proposing 2 different style homes with different facades and everything, ranch and colonial. What we're seeing on some of our other developments, that people really are trending towards the ranches. I don't know, Joe, is it 50-50 or is it more colonial still? Because ranches are increasing. What all of our ranches do is they have the option for an extra room on the second floor for grandkids or in a home office, those type of things, so they're becoming more and more popular.
Okay, nice. And then the other thing is the trail, it will be maintained by the city, is that correct?
I believe that that's the way your trail systems like to work, is we'll build it, and then it's kind of a mutual agreement. I'm sure there's legal paperwork involved, but the city would maintain it.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hoderick?
Good evening.
Seen you before, and Mondrian is one of our great developers in the city that we do enjoy doing work with. I'm going to be honest with you, I go back and forth on this one. And the truth is I do love the buffer that you're providing to the neighbors to the south. And I think in that regard, this cluster ordinance is being met. The planning chair voiced his concerns, and I share them, about the number of driveways and the frontage on Eckford. And I thought maybe it's because I'm looking at a diagram, go to the street, try to get that feel. I feel like those homes are going to be right up. And the cluster was supposed to, the whole idea of the cluster ordinance was to have those buffers. And I think maybe there was a trade-off made, probably rightfully, for those neighbors to the south, and that's bringing those 9 homes up to Eckford. And what causes me heartburn is what we approved across the way does tuck more in. The homes to the east are set back a little further. And so I feel like this cluster is great until we get to Eckford, and then it's out of character for me. I'm having a disconnect. And so I guess I just want to bluntly ask, can there be anything done about that? When you look at, I'm not a planner.
Yeah.
I'm a resident that's trying to look out for my fellow residents and also look out for proper, high-quality development coming to the city. I love that. But I'm having a hard time. Can you help me?
Yes, I think so. I'll try. First of all, it's all going to be great. You said only parts of it are great. It'll all be great. So the city of Troy, I live up in Clarkston, and some of our areas are newer suburban areas and some of them are more traditional neighborhoods. This is a unique area of Troy that it's really kind of on that edge of traditional neighborhoods. And traditional neighborhoods throughout Michigan are built on a grid, right? We have more linear blocks and repeating blocks that go north and south and east and west, and this is in that area. And from a planning point of view, sometimes I get frustrated when we try and take a suburban model, which might fit really well in other parts of Troy or other parts of Independence Township, and put it into a traditional part of the neighborhood. You know, this is a gridded part of the neighborhood. And so what we do as planners is we look to say what's going on within the area. And so if I go to the blocks immediately south, you know, between Rochester and Tallman, and I go immediately south, we really do have traditional lots that face the street where the driveways come. And what's interesting is the street immediately south to us, I apologize, I've forgotten the name, but it has 9 driveways across the same type of frontage under that R1C housing. So we're not adding more driveways than this traditional area of Troy would be. We're doing what we, again, kind of going back to planning school, the thing that I get frustrated more than with suburban areas kind of plugged into traditional areas is what we call a front-back problem, where when I go down streets and people's front yards from the traditional homes are fronting the street, and their front porches and their mailboxes and the driveways are fronting the street, and then you get to a newer area and all of a sudden it's turned backwards and now I've got backyards.
Right.
And that would really be our alternative, is to put fences and rear yards and swing sets along Eckford. And then it's just odd, right? It's what I call a front-back problem. So we chose to be traditional, to not overload that street, to have it really the same as similar streets right in the area, and then to really, you know, grant that buffer where people live in their backyards.
In that regard, I do see where you're saying the traditional to the south of there. I'm looking to the north is a little bit different. And
Yeah.
just to help you understand where my brain focused, that's where I was. It is consistent with south of there. I drove that street and that neighborhood, so I hear you. It's just...
I appreciate the thought. It's a difficult thing, but what we try and, what I think what Troy does with a lot of communities, you know, if we were doing this in the 80s, everything would be internalized and backwards, and people would drive into their garage. Now we're trying to create streets where people live and talk and walk and everything, and we really think that this will add to that.
I have to wrestle with it. The residents that live there, you know, it is a little bit unique, and yet things do change and development does happen. So I get it, and I get the multiple considerations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hoderick. Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Craig.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, this is a follow-up to what Councilmember Hoderick just shared, because I'll be honest, I have some of those same questions and reservations. It is those 9 driveways on Eckford. when cars have to turn this way and turn this way, and they're going to have to back out, and there's a development going in across the street, and you have a school around the corner,
Right.
and a trail. But the question I want to ask you is, in your perspective, and this is your expertise, what would I see if I'm looking in on those 9 homes from Eckford? Because what hit me is I realized if I'm driving, there's a requirement. These are front yards, so you're not going to have tons of screening, as we just talked about, because people want to look out. Only required to have 1 tree per lot. So in my mind, I think what hit me when I was out there is I'm not only going to see those homes, but I'm going to see the homes behind them and even potentially the road behind, because there's no, the decision was there's also no kind of screening, no trees between the backyards of these 2 homes. So to me, that's a very different character form from what's a bit north of Eckford, and for me, even what's south of that development as well. So just want to hear what would you see as you look in on those 9 homes? Am I going to be able to see the rows behind it and the row behind it?
It's an interesting question. I'm trying to visualize in my mind. I don't think it would look different than any other traditional neighborhood in the city of Troy. In other words, the homes and the blocks immediately below us certainly have been there for longer periods of time, and so their trees have grown in, and we're not prohibiting tree planting by any stretch of the imagination. So there will be trees planted, but they take time, right? So yes, I think when those homes originally are built, they'll be beautiful, they'll be great architecture, they'll be appropriately set back from the street just like every other home in that area. But yeah, I guess I'd be silly to say you're not going to see the home behind it any more than you would when the neighborhoods next to us, or even the more suburban areas of Troy, when those are built on much bigger lots, even beyond R1C, you certainly can, because of the nature of engineering, you can see many homes, but you come back in a surprisingly short amount of time, 7 years or so, and all of a sudden these trees have grown up and it's starting to, really blend into the fabric of the neighborhood. So in my perspective, it's not going to look odd. It's not going to look, boy, look at, I can see into their kitchen. It's really like every other traditional neighborhood.
Okay, 2 other quick questions. One is, I know the parallel plan is we're not talking about that, but just related to this is, how often has Mondrian built on regulated wetlands? And I know the current cluster that we're looking at, it would preserve the wetlands, but just out of curiosity, is there a percentage of?
I'd have to check with Joe, but just in my experience working with Mondrian as well as many developers, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it was pretty common, right? We could fill at least parts of wetlands or mitigate them. Eagle, quite admittedly, is getting more and more stringent, and it's becoming harder and harder. We received, and it was forwarded to the city, a preliminary approval, which essentially says, hey, as long as you guys get final permitting and we go through the engineering together, the state of Michigan, Eagle, has essentially already provided a permit that allows us to fill those smaller regulated wetlands that Mr. Senevic pointed out. And that's more typical. I'd be fooling you, and I wouldn't want to come back again if I said, oh yeah, we could fill those 2 acres of wetlands or that 1.5 acres of wetland. But the smaller pockets are typical to develop like this. In an area where we've got kind of that finger that goes up the eastern side, it would not be unlikely, if it was important to the development or for a road crossing or something, as long as we could show to the state that boy, we really did connect Road A to Road B, they'd probably allow us to nip off one of those fingers, but probably not the whole thing. And so that's why we're saying that parallel planning on a piece of property like this really is just mathematical. It's how wide is the property and how wide should the lots be and how much buffer should we provide. And so mathematically, that parallel plan probably is pretty close to at least a plan that could be built on here. So I think it is reasonable to say that parallel plan with 20 lots probably is buildable. So in my mind, it's really a question of the extra 6 lots which are permitted by your ordinance in exchange for the open space, the tree preservation, the 87-foot buffer, and all those other things that we're bringing.
Okay. Just one last quick question. When I was out there, it appeared that there's a small creek that is in the preserved wetland area, which on the parallel plan, I think it would be like lot 7 or 8. Is there a creek out there of some sort? Like going north to south?
This time of year, the wetlands by their nature attract water, and this time of the year it's flowing. So I think, yeah, you probably would see, and which is why they are regulated. They're part of that more regional system. In the summer, they dry up pretty good, but this time of year, it wouldn't be unusual to see wetlands. Frankly, if it wasn't there, they probably wouldn't be regulated, and we'd have different options.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Councilmember Erickson Galt.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to repeat the question that I mentioned earlier. Timeline for construction completion, and have you taken into account the construction that's going to be happening on Rochester Road?
We for all of those reasons, we're always interested in moving as quickly as possible. Now, it is a long process. If we were to be granted approval tonight, as the planner had mentioned, we still would have to go through, obviously, final engineering and permitting. So our goal would be to be under construction at least by this fall, but that would be dependent on all the permitting and all the reviews and so forth. In today's market, even with the increased interest rates and everything else, Joe was just telling me that they are essentially almost out of built homes, the market right now, because of people just want to move. And unlike, trends change, and where people used to like to buy a lot and say, we're going to build a home, now what they're looking for is what's built or almost, 80% built, and we want to build that, buy that and move in a month or so. And so we would build quickly, and we would expect this to sell out, likely within a year and a half or so.
Okay. And then how much paving is going to take place on Eckford? Is it the entirety of the street or just the portion near your property and the one across the Eckford?
I honestly would have to, the frontage of our property along, and then, of course, that's tied together with the other developments in the area, so I think there's more of a regional improvement.
Okay. And according to the proposed plan, it shows sidewalks also along Eckford. Is that a definite?
Exterior sidewalks on Eckford, exterior sidewalks on Tallman, and then interior sidewalks within the new road in the inside, and then the trail.
And have you looked at one of the criteria in the cluster standard is sustainable design features? What, if any, sustainable design features are you using on this project?
Well, I think, in fact, one of the planning commissioners asked the same question, and I think this is kind of almost a poster child, if you will. We're preserving the wetland, whether we want to or not, but we're preserving the wetland. And there's different degrees of that, right? You can preserve a wetland, but get pretty darn close to it and kind of spoil it. What we're doing is kind of encapsulating it in a much larger open system. So we're preserving not only the wetland, but a significant buffer along the whole eastern side, all the trees, and then we're taking that 87 feet along the southern side and preserving that. So from an environmental point of view, we're not only setting aside 35%, but we're truly preserving it, and it's almost in completely pristine position. I think it's also environmentally sound to take advantage of this regional water system, as opposed to saying, no, we want to either put our stormwater, we want to take down trees, and we want to build a big basin that's fairly ugly and put it on, on someone's backyard and call it open space. There's other ways to do it. We could put it under the road, but the way the city is doing it with this regional system, and we're able to participate in that, is, I think, truly much better for the environment.
And my last question is, speaking of the Planning Commission meetings, there was a resident who lives just to the south who was concerned that the trail would be incredibly close to her property. What buffering, if any, would be utilized to give that resident a little bit of, privacy?
Well, we heard that it was a resident, I believe she said that she's been in that area for 40 years or so. We certainly appreciate it. As Lot 26, which is the one lot that fronts on Tolman, That setback there is 40 foot of open space. The rest of it is 87. And so what we said is we can absolutely take that trail and favor it to the north, so it's much, much closer to Lot 26. And then as it goes into the site and heads to the north, that it continues to go up. So there's 40 foot of dense brush there, not only the trees, but all the brush. And we're committed to stake that. The plans you show aren't engineered, so right now we're showing a trail, but that would be engineered based on the tree survey, and then it'll be field staked, and we'll certainly work with the city or any stakeholders to make sure that the location is appropriate. But there's enough evidence, and I think why the Troy trail system is so great is trails make better communities, but I absolutely hear and understand what she's saying, and so we'll do everything that we can. If it needs extra landscaping, we can take care of that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good questions. Additional questions? Okay. I will open the public hearing for E1. There's two people that have signed up. Of course, you don't have to sign up for a public hearing, so if you can think of something after the fact. First up is Tony Kappas. I will remind you, Mr. Kappas, as you know, you have 3 minutes. At 1 minute, the light will turn yellow, and when it
You'll
turns
notice I
red.
didn't bring my entourage today. I realized the last time around, it didn't help. So I'm here for myself. I do have a couple of concerns and questions. Everybody keeps on saying that we want to model this after a traditional subdivisions and make them look like everything else that's in Troy. However, many times we've asked about what about sidewalks? Are we going to get sidewalks on Eckford on both sides? No. We would never do that, is the answer that I've received. So you want to treat Eckford different, but you want it to look like it's traditional. The other question I have, and this is probably one of my biggest concerns, is where are they going to put all the telephone poles? That street on that side is lined with telephone poles. I hope, I'm at 501 Eckford, so I'm directly across from this subdivision. I hope the city is not going to say, well, no big deal, we'll just move that all the way over to the north side, and that won't affect it. My concerns are is that between the sidewalks and between and the right-of-ways for the electrical, there really isn't room to put those 9 houses exactly the way that they want to do that. So I don't know. And the other question is if you're going to pave the streets, does that mean that you're going to get rid of the sewer systems that are there right now, the ditches? Because there certainly isn't room on that side of Eckford to have the telephone poles and the sidewalks and then the ditches and everything else. I don't see any of that addressed in the pictures that they put in. So am I happy with this? No. Am I going to live with it? Absolutely. I'm not going to have any choice in that. Unfortunately, the city of Troy has decided that more houses are more important than wetlands. I will give you a side note, though. There are communities in the state of Michigan that have been buying up the wetland properties and making them into parks because they've determined that those wetland properties, when the water comes in, the water stays in that area. It doesn't destroy into the other area, other residents' areas, and then when it dissipates out, it's gone. It makes perfect sense. Grand Rapids has been doing this for many years. They seem to see the value of having wetlands and having areas that this water can collect. For some reason, Troy doesn't seem to see that. So, am I opposed? Absolutely. I'd like to get some answers to the questions that I've got because I don't see it on his drawings at all. Thank you very much. I appreciate the council.
Thank you, Mr. Kappas. I'll see if I can get your questions answered momentarily. Next up is Greg Schaff.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Greg Schaff, 613 Thurber Drive, Troy, Michigan. First off, I want to thank you for the questions you asked the developer this time. It didn't happen. On the other side of Eckford, there was a lot less homework done before voting occurred. This time, you guys came loaded with some decent questions. I appreciate that. Couple things, Councilperson Galt, the last timing I had was that development was going to start in fall of '23 and last 30 months. That's from Mondrian Properties. Councilmember Brooks, yes, when they raise the grade, it is going to affect the water levels in other areas. I have standing water behind my house on Thurber right now, where they're going to put house number 25. They're going to increase the grade, which is going to put more standing water there, more mosquito larvae, more things that devalue my quality time outside. At the same time, there's a massive white oak tree out there. It's about 270 years old. And I'm concerned for the well-being of that tree, mainly because as they try to improve the grade, as they add drainage, I don't want to see that in the drip line of this tree. This is a majestic tree. It was noted in the Eagle report. They flagged that. So I have a problem with those things. But the one thing I have the biggest problem with is at the building, at the Planning Commission meeting, every resident that spoke not only spoke about that trail, but Lot 26. It doesn't belong there. It shouldn't be part of this. It should be eliminated. You can get rid of that without any issue. You can roll in another 1.5% on the price of the other houses. You're not going to miss anything as a developer. It's just simple math. So I am against those portions of this plan. When the vote came on the other side of Eckford, council, by their own admission, didn't feel comfortable voting on it. They felt like there was unanswered questions, but you voted anyways. The city attorney said that, we should vote because we don't want to have people come back. If you're not, yes, that was a quote. I implore you this time, if you still have questions, vote it down. That doesn't mean it's over. That gives an opportunity for more discussion.
Chair, 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes those that have signed up for public comment for E1, the public hearing. As I mentioned, it doesn't preclude anybody from speaking. It looks like we have someone coming forward.
I did sign up, but...
Oh, we did have some issues out there. Just please state your name.
Russell Krasha. I'm at 627 Thurber, and I have similar concerns. I overlook lot 25, which is right now about 3.5 foot of water, and it is wet all year round. Displacing the water coming down is going to create a problem for my basement, Greg's basement, and other people in that area. So that is one of my concerns. One of the other concerns is we keep talking about having the wetlands preserved. Are we truly preserving them? Because it looks like there's a T at the end of this street that looks like lot 25 could extend into other lots as it goes forward. Are we guaranteeing that portion east side is going to stay wetlands? Or will someone buy the lot next to it and now encroach on that? So is there any guarantee that that is actually going to stay a park or stay that 35%? So that's one of my concerns, along with, and I think Tony said it, the houses going in on Eckford doesn't match the other side of Eckford. It doesn't match Thurber. It is different. Different isn't bad. Ellen, you sort of hit it as, what does it look like? What's the character of the housing? Is it Troy? We moved into Troy years ago, and we enjoyed the community. I'm also going to agree with Greg on lot 26 and the traffic report. If you ever go at 4 o'clock on a school day to Tallman, heaven help you with the minivan moms. You will get in trouble. So that is very busy, and I pity the poor people on Eckford when that gets paved. It's going to be a speedway going to the light and getting out. I just about get creamed on Thurber at school days. So that's really what I wanted to make sure. Wetlands preserved, make sure that those trees are preserved, and is there a guarantee that we are going to be able to keep that as a preserved area? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sorry your registration didn't show up on the system, but I'm glad you spoke anyway. Anybody else like to speak on this item?
Hi, Cheryl Kappas. I live 501 Eckford, and I just want to thank the council that if you vote yes on this, I'm going to have some great construction across the street from me. I'm going to have some great construction to the east of me. I can't wait to hear all that beep, 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 all the way from Monday through Saturday while I'm trying to do things at my house and have my own peace of mind and be able to go out in my backyard, and I won't be able to. Along with the racetrack that I'm going to now be getting, we're going to get to the end where that curve is on Eckford. My neighbor already doesn't have any grass on that curve. If you drive down there, you can see there's ruts where people, in lot 26, their person's never going to be able to get out of their driveway. They've already torn down stuff already on this lot, like they've already got the approval. There's already missing houses that were there before. And we were not granted a traffic study when they did the first development on Eckford because it wasn't warranted. But now that we're getting our traffic study with this one, we have 292 cars from this development. Does that also include the 292 cars we're going to get from the other development that's on that street? Which is, oh, if I can do math, 584 cars. That's a lot more than 1 to 2 a minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kappas. Appreciate your comments. Anyone else? All right, I will close the public hearing. I do want to follow up with city staff on, is anyone prepared to speak about utilities and the location of utilities, and or also with the paving of the road, does that affect the sewer, the stormwater ditches?
Mayor, I can start. First of all, the engineering design has not been completed because that's in the final site plan phase. Two, we do not own utilities. That's DTE. So if it is needed and requested by the landowner, it may go in. I don't know off the top of my head if they're going to need additional service, but I can't imagine why. There was also, I think, some comments that it won't fit. I disagree with that. They would be able to fit the lots there. I don't know if the city engineer, if you have any other comments that you would like to press related to this? I know you got to come up.
Good evening. Good evening. Yeah, the utilities, there's enough space to absolutely fit. AT&T, DTE, all those go underground with the new, a long time ago, utility poles were outlawed in the city. So all the new subdivisions, all the new site condos, all those DTEs, AT&Ts, they go underground. So there's plenty of right-of-way space out there. They pave the roads. The existing storm sewers and ditches will be modified slightly, but they won't have to be redone. So water, sanitary, none of that stuff will have to change.
Okay, thank you. As for guaranteed continued preservation of the wetlands as asked, I think I know the answer, but I'll defer to the city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, the proposed resolution, should you choose to approve this cluster development, is contingent upon there being a satisfactory conservation easement, a open space preservation agreement that would be protection that would be in perpetuity. So you would, again, should you decide that this is something that you want to approve, that is, it is in the resolution that would be necessary for final approval.
Thank you. Any additional questions for staff? Okay. For discussion purposes, I will move E1, site plan review, file number SP 2022-0027, proposed estates at Eckford, one-family residential cluster, south side of Eckford, west of Rochester, parcels 88-20-15-252, -036-037-034-005. Section 15, currently zoned R1C, one family residential district, as printed in the agenda.
Support.
Moved by the chair, supported by Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Kranga, that we approve E1 public hearing preliminary site plan review as read into the record. Discussion. No discussion?
I'm thinking.
You're thinking. Oh, okay. I have never seen this council have no discussion, sorry. I'll start. Oh, go ahead. Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Kranga.
I was trying not to go first, but I'll share. And I'm going to share kind of by way of story of how my deliberations have gotten to where I am. And just to be honest, when I started with one opinion. By looking through the agenda packet, I thought I was in one place. But as I went out to the site, and I think it speaks to the power, you need to get out to the sites. You need to spend time, walk around, drive up and down. And that's where I pulled out the plan and really spent time looking at what's there and what's in the plan. And I'll be honest, my opinion changed as I spent a lot of time doing that. And it was only afterwards that I listened to the Planning Commission meeting and looked at the minutes, because I wanted to let myself see what stood out, what I noticed, and kind of come to my own conclusions that way. So to start, kind of the first thing I noticed when I was there was there's currently essentially 4 driveways, old driveways there. And that's going to turn into these 9 driveways on Eckford. So I started thinking about that, those 9 driveways, and then started driving on Eckford towards Rochester Road. And noticing, if you look at how those homes are set back quite far from the road. There's a good deal of distance from them. And so then as I looked at those 9 homes, realizing that their setback is much closer to the road. And the distance, of course, because it's a cluster, they're quite close together. So then I drove north to Eckford, as you drive around the little corner that goes up. And those homes, yes, those are closer to the road. So I was like, okay, maybe there's some continuity with that. But if you look at those homes, even if they're a little closer to the road, if you look at the spacing, and if you look at the tree coverage they have around there, there's more of a tree coverage. And so when I look back at those 9 homes, that's when I realized, and I asked a clarifying question, is what's required? Because they are front yards. At the end of the day, you can only have so much screening because it's someone's front yard. You want to be able to see out. And the applicant is only required to have 1 tree per home on those 9. So that's when it struck me, oh, you're going to look in and you'll see those homes, but you're probably going to see the homes behind it because there's no requirement, there's no screening or anything between the 2 backyards. And maybe you're even going to see the 3rd row as well. And that's something that you don't see. If you look at the homes, if you go towards Rochester Road, if you go north on Eckford, even the development south of there is enough tree coverage and wooded feel to that this will essentially be clear cut. And so to me, that feels really different than anything that I was seeing around there. And compatibility and massing, that is partly what we look into and set back. And then I realized how different this is, as we were stating, from the development across the street. So the one across the street, I pulled it up, Eckford Woods Cluster, is, as we discussed, the area that is actually being preserved provides a wonderful kind of buffer. And though you do have a couple of homes on Eckford that will have driveways, it's just 2. But most of the homes, especially when it's summer, will be buffered. You won't see a lot of that development, and even the ones there, because you have that buffering. And that is the opposite of what this development is. And as I thought further about that, again, I really appreciate about Eckford, the Eckford Woods cluster across the street, is you have the applicant commit to a certain amount of those homes being ranch, and we've never had an applicant do that, and I really appreciate the applicant agreeing to do that. And that shows kind of a commitment to missing middle housing, when you say we will commit to a certain number of those homes being ranch homes. Whereas in this case, we don't have that happening, which then brings me to the argument around the need for housing. Yes, we need housing in Troy. People want to be in Troy. But I would argue what we need for housing is we do need this missing middle housing. And I'm going to be honest, without a commitment to a certain percentage of being ranch homes, to me, I'm not convinced that's missing middle housing. I think, to be honest, these are going to be $1 million homes or close to it. And I know even if it's by right, they can be even larger. I recognize that. But I'm not convinced that's actually missing middle housing. What we saw across the road, I think there is some commitment to that. And then the wetlands. So I wrestled with the wetlands because it is, it's a bit of a wager. If this is not approved, the best bet for preserving the wetlands, I hope the residents know, is actually to approve the cluster, because for sure those will be preserved. But I just would wager that Mondrian isn't going to build on the wetlands, that even with the parallel plan, I had colored them out, the 5 that are likely not to be developed is, I think my assumption and gut is that Eagle will not permit it, or that it would be cost prohibitive for the applicant to move forward on those homes. So that does bring you down to 20 homes. And you still actually would have a little bit, maybe not quite as much, but you still actually would have some southern buffer with those, if those 5 lots, Eagle deems them as not being able to be developed, you would actually have a little bit of buffer there. And finally, the last consideration for me is traffic. Traffic is a big one for me. Putting 9 driveways on Eckford, on a road that's not just a straight road, but a road that goes and curves here and curves here, I can't help but to be concerned. Across the road, you will have 2 driveways where people would be backing out as well. These people have to back out, these 9 homes. You have also an entryway into a new development. And then lot 26 on Tolman, as I spent time looking at that, it's not directly across from the elementary school, but it's very close to the entrance to the elementary school. So if people trying to get out, you're going to have all the traffic with the school, and now we're adding the pedestrian path where you may have pedestrians trying to cross here. To me, in good conscience, I struggle with that for the health, safety, and welfare of residents with how that's structured. So I think in conclusion, as I looked through the cluster standards, I think I personally had questions on standards B, C, E, H, and I. Just questions, concerns about how those are and whether they're met. And I think just for those reasons, I'm not comfortable approving the cluster in this configuration at this time.
Thank you. Well thought out and spoken. I appreciate that. No applause, please. I know it's exciting. Further discussion? Councilmember Hoderick.
I just want to make sure that residents who think a no vote means there won't be development here understand that this is private property and the owner has the right, by right, to develop. And while we're not debating whether we're doing the parallel plan, because that's not what's before us, it's this cluster proposal that's before us, the likelihood of a by right approach coming in there is very high. And so to be clear, in terms of what the expectations are, regardless of our vote, this is property that's going to be developed. Troy is an almost built out city. I think it's 98 point something, it's nearly built out. And it's a great place for builders to build. It's a great place for people to move to, and they really want to. So we're not going to be able to do some sort of body block and make sure that nothing happens here. Something's going to go here. And I think, that's a reality. So when we're looking at when a developer takes the time, and he or she does not need to, bring us a cluster proposal, that is something they're proposing because we have an ordinance that is looking at that. They're trying to work with us to create preservation, and they know what cities and neighborhoods are looking for, and that's why we developed the ordinance. So I wanted to clarify that. And the notion that we don't think about parks, what happened is many, many years ago, before any of us were involved, great city planners and great city leaders actually planned for a lot of parks in this city. We have so many that we don't even have the money to develop them all the way that we would like to. We are loaded with parks and green space, and I would encourage folks to go to our city website to look at those parks. So the idea that the city would be in a position to be able to buy up this land and create another park, we just had a budget study discussion where we're looking at, capital constraints and whatnot. That's probably the least likely thing that can happen in the current financial environment. So I wanted to take a second because residents come out, they're looking to give input, they want to seek understanding, just have that little bit of a dialogue. Something's going to go here. This will get developed. And our question before us that we think about very, very seriously, even the one that was north of here, is what makes the most sense? How do we best represent the residents and the developers in the process? And so you see us struggle through that and think it through, and I can assure you, I know all 7 of us do that very seriously. Just thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hoderick. Appreciate that. Councilmember Hamilton?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. This one is, I've been wavering on this one, and honestly, I think Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Cranga's argument really stuck with me. Just comparing the one on the north side of Eckford to this one, there is some substantial differences. And I know the debate is really, do we approve this? Or if we say no, then it's up to chance. Will they do a parallel plan? They could also have a better cluster plan that's more in line with what the previous one, but maybe has less of it. I really like the trail in there. I like that the developer would build that. We'd be able to link it up. But I just think it can be better. We've approved quite a few clusters that I've felt much more comfortable with. It seemed like a clear difference from what we saw before. And I'm very uncomfortable with what the mayor brought up with, that the open space requirement includes an area that really couldn't be developed anyway. And I feel like, yeah, that's what the ordinance says, but we have the discretion to kind of evaluate that. And I feel here, I just don't know if the gain is enough to justify it quite how it is now. Not to say that I'm opposed to any cluster here, but I think as presented, there's improvements that could be made. You said a guarantee of, more missing middle housing, maybe a better interaction with Eckford. Like you said, the north side of it is more woodsy with that new development, and then we're gonna have this on the south. I'm uncomfortable with that. I think I have to vote no on this one.
Thank you, Councilmember Hamilton. Additional discussion? Councilmember Abraham.
I wanted to piggyback a little bit off of what Councilwoman Hoderick said, because what is before us is a cluster development, which if it gets denied, developer can build by right, or developer, could put forth additional resources towards a different parallel plan. But the third option is not no development, and we have to be really mindful of that. The other thing I want to be really mindful of is treating this cluster development as a comparison to other clusters, which is not really the standard that is before us. Is it by right, or do we want to proceed with the cluster? It does make me wonder, had this project come to council first, would the dialogue be different versus the project that's to the north of Eckford? Certainly there are similar themes related to traffic, construction related to the Rochester Road project that will be here before we know it. But the reality is this property is going to get developed. There will be driveways on Eckford if it's by right, or very likely to, I should say. There may be driveways on Tallman. God help that person right across from the elementary school. Something will go there. Is this plan better? Does it protect the wetlands in a way that our residents want? There are a lot of competing, I'll say, interests here. When you look at it just from a wetlands perspective, having this development protects those wetlands in perpetuity. That is no small consideration. To me, we hear resoundingly from our residents that protection of green space is critically important to them, even if they don't live near it. And so that is a very big box to check off. Is this, I'll say, compatible with the development to the north? That development is screened off, or is intended to be screened off. It's more pocketed in. And so the compatibility there may not be quite as big of a factor because it is going to be screened off. You have to mainly enter that development through that private street. There's only a couple driveways off of Eckford. And so then it becomes a question, does it really fit in with the rest of the neighborhood? I live in an older neighborhood where larger, I'll say, parcels of land where a large home or a large piece of property got sold, and there are cluster developments. And so I can appreciate the compatibility factor. The question to me that always goes back is it better than what could be here by right? What protections does it offer? And as I said before, the protection of wetlands is a very compelling one. So if one of the residents mentioned, if you have any other questions, don't vote tonight. I think the struggle that you see here at the table, just as it was a few months ago, wasn't so much do we have answers to all the questions, because there are some questions that won't be answered until final site, which is months after something is approved. I think what you're seeing up here is, do the benefits outweigh any detractions? And I'm going to engineer speak for a moment. In the Pew matrix, weighing the pros and cons of this, it becomes a very level assessment of what's important to residents, and it's weighting the factors of that. And when you do that, it becomes very close. And I think you see that debate here tonight. So I wanted to take a moment to say to those who are watching, if you see council being hesitant or very careful in their words, it's because they are taking this extremely seriously. I can say for myself, I feel like I have all the information I need. It's just a very close call. So with that, Mayor, I think those are all my comments for tonight.
Thank you, Councilmember Abraham. Can I ask, Stevie, are these mics on? Are these speakers on? I cannot hear through them to save my life. I don't know if anybody else is struggling with that. I don't know what the sound's like.
Yeah, I know it's kind of quiet.
But I can't hear through these, so I'm struggling to hear.
So you need us to yell at you? Is that
Yeah, right.
good?
So can we start over? No, I'm kidding. Okay, Councilmember Erickson Galt.
Thank you, Mayor.
Speak into your mics, I guess, is my point.
I've got mine nice and close to my face. Tell me if you can't hear me. I agree with Councilmember Abraham that this is a very close call. It's something I've struggled with. I struggled with the development on the other side of Eckford, and I struggle with this development. And why I struggle with it are very many of the same things. I am concerned about the handling of surface water runoff. I share your concerns. I've personally witnessed situations where people have suffered greatly because of water coming from somebody else's property onto theirs. It's a mess, and once it happens, it's hard to fix it, you know. And I do trust that our regional water system that we're creating would ideally take care of this. I'm not an expert, so I can't say for certain it's going to make a difference, but I believe that we have the expertise to make sure that we're doing everything we can to ensure that the water from this property is not affecting anyone else's, and possibly even less than it is now. I mean, what you have right now is basically ditches, and with this plan, ideally, you would have a much more stable handling of that. I'm concerned with the traffic. The traffic, there's already a headache. I've not personally experienced it, but I've talked to people who have. It's not just the elementary school, it is the cut-through traffic that happens in that whole area around there. It's a mess. I'm concerned with the paving of Eckford, a street that we've been told by the residents both during the last hearing and in this one, you like it unpaved. That's why you moved there. That's what you want it to be. And that's why I asked. I wanted to be sure that if I did vote yes, at a minimum, it wouldn't necessarily result in the entire paving of the entirety of Eckford. I'm concerned that this cluster meets some, but perhaps not a majority of the standards. I was kind of like doing like little hash marks here as I was going through. I think it meets the preservation of natural resources. There are some buffers, perhaps not enough, but there are some buffers. I'm not sure I buy the argument that preserving wetlands is sustainable design, but certainly maybe the water runoff system would be a sustainable design. Does the density bonus, is it commensurate with the benefit offered to achieve that bonus? I'm not sure it is. Is it a innovative and creative design? I don't think so at all. I mean, we just a few weeks ago saw an incredibly innovative and creative design come in front of us that we were very enthusiastic about, and there weren't residents coming to us begging us to not do it. So this is a very close call for me. What I would echo what Councilmember Hoderick said, there's going to be development here. It's probably going to be very similar to the parallel plan, even though that's not something we can definitely consider and say, yes, that's what's going to happen. We don't know. We don't know exactly what this developer would do if we vote no on this cluster. But we do know there's going to be development. And a lot of the things that concern me about this plan would concern me about that type of development that they can do by right, and I would have zero ability to control it. I can't prevent Mondrian, if Mondrian comes back with a by right design, I have no authority, this council has no authority to tell them, you have to preserve those wetlands instead of going to Eagle and asking to fill them in. Theoretically, they can do that. You know, would they? I don't know. It's a toss-up given the wetland regulation. But I'm just not sure that if I were to vote no on this plan, it would not prevent you from suffering the same problems with the next plan that comes along. So that's what I'm struggling with here is, should I vote yes on this and at least get some benefit of the regional drainage system, the wetland preservation, the trail running through it, which is great, or vote no and have a coin toss over what comes next, which we don't know, and which, if it's a by right design, it's not coming here in front of council. And that's essentially the question, and that was a question last time. Can we exercise some control over this? And, even if it's not ideal, or should we punt and see what comes up next? It's a very difficult question, and I'm struggling with it because I hear what you're saying. I hear about, and I believe you, about some of the negative effects. It is a very difficult decision.
Thank you, Councilmember Erickson Galt. Appreciate that. Councilmember Brooks.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm exactly where Councilmember Erickson Galt is. It is a very, very difficult decision because I struggle with it because we have to really think about it as not as what it is presently, but what they will develop. It will be developed. So you have to really think about, okay, there will be 20 properties that they can develop by right versus this cluster development that is before us. I have concerns about the water. I have concerns about the traffic. I share all of those concerns. But if they're going to develop potentially 20 homes in that area, will that eliminate the concerns about the water? Will that eliminate the concerns about the traffic? I don't think so. And then also just looking at, I don't love how those 9 homes are right off of Eckford and those driveways are right off of Eckford. The setback is only 25 feet, but by right, it's about 30 feet it would be. So would a 5-foot difference make that much of a difference? I don't know. 5-foot setback difference. They could still have, limited, buffering in the front. So I don't know, but basically, the cluster does preserve the wetlands, and that's the only way that we know it can preserve it. If we say no, I don't know what can happen. They could potentially try to develop it. They could potentially try to fill it, and that could potentially even make more issues with water. This is the best way sometimes that we can control, what comes before us and what gets developed and how it gets developed. Even if it's not perfect, just understanding that no matter what, there's going to be something developed there. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Brooks. Everyone's gone, right? Yeah, okay. The comments from fellow council, I think, it sounds like we're all on the same page of not being, well, a couple of us have made some affirmative decisions or statements, but there's a lot of kind of 50-50 feelings about this on various issues and such, and I'm certainly there as well. Although I'm struggling more so, I think, than some of the others. I think our first cluster approved was from Mondrian. I know they have a history of doing a lot of development in our city, and certainly there are a lot of happy new homeowners in Troy because of the homes that Joe and Mondrian have built. That is, part of Mondrian's story. It's not so much goes into my decision making here tonight. I can't. I struggle with a couple things. I struggle with the concept when we the mass transformation of this Eckford neighborhood. It's going to be very different regardless of what happens tonight. The project approved across the street, something will get built here, and whether it's this cluster or by right or a different cluster or something, I can't imagine what it's like to live there and have lived there for decades, whether you're on Thurber behind or Eckford further down or across the street like the campuses are. it's a transformational change to this neighborhood. And while it may be great for the new families moving in, I know it's awful for you. It's not anything you wanted when you moved there however many years ago. Cheryl, you don't want to listen to the construction. I get it, and I appreciate your colorful commentary as always, and I certainly understand where you're coming from. It's difficult to grasp. We can drive through there, we can walk through there, but we don't live there. And this happens to be a rare part of our city that, between the Robertson development that touches up behind DPW and up to Long Lake, the cluster we approved on the north side of Eckford, and potentially this, 3 major development projects within that small footprint, I don't think has probably happened in our city for a couple decades. I mean, probably since some of the north part of Troy was developed from farms. And I don't think that can be I don't think that can be fully recognized by anybody here today. We recognize it, but it's a very, very different thing. And you've got the school across the street, and it's just unique. I share a lot of the same concerns everybody's spoken about. I don't, although I'm famous for repeating them anyway and making them my own, housing's important. I don't think this is missing middle housing. I don't think whatever gets built there will be, and I appreciate that commentary, but to me, that's not what this is. But ultimately, I really struggle with from out of the gate, I asked a question of Brent, and I really struggle with the applicant and developers getting credit for open space that has to be open space anyway. Yes, you can fill wetlands, and there's a process for that, and we may all, if this doesn't pass tonight, we all may be deeply disappointed to learn in a year or two that Eagle has said, you know what, Mondrian, you do a lot of work in our state, and yeah, we trust that we can fill these, and maybe it all gets developed. I don't know. But I don't think the spirit of the cluster ordinance that I passed back in 2016 with a couple of members up here was about preserving space that was already likely to be preserved, whether by a state authority or something else. So I struggle with that aspect of it. And I recognize there's additional open space preserved in this plan that's above and beyond the regulated wetlands. So I don't want to that's not the only thing that's part of it. But I look at some numbers and I think, well, if there's 20 by right houses that can be built, isn't that better than 26? I know that's a little bit elementary to look at it like that, and like we've talked about, there's risks with the wetlands and everything, but it does reduce the traffic a little bit. Maybe some bigger lots is more compatible with what's in the existing area. They're not that much bigger, but maybe that helps a little bit. Maybe 5 feet of additional setback. It's not a ton, but it's a little bit more. It does affect it a little more. The buffer in the back on the southern end, the 87 feet, and those residents on Thurber, the couple residents from Thurber that were here tonight seemed more concerned with the water issues than that buffer. Maybe it's because they live further east down there and they're more affected by the wetlands. I don't know if that's compelling enough to approve this tonight. I can't remember which one of you brought up the fact that it might be different if we looked at this before. Maybe that was Edna. It's a very true statement, and I think that's why we do need to look at these both in their individual application, but I do think we have a responsibility to look at the area as a whole. And that's where I've always struggled with these clusters, and we've got asked, well, there's only so many trips related to this project. Yes, but what about the 500 units we just approved around the corner? That's not contemplated in our traffic studies, and I always think it maybe should be, or at least addressed a little bit more. At the end of the day, I know something's going to be developed here. The city's not going to buy this property. It can't afford to. I think that ship has sailed anyway. There are a lot of undeveloped parks that the city already owns that frankly, the funding's not there to develop. I don't know how that plays out in the long run, but I just don't know that I'm compelled enough tonight to approve this cluster, because I think either the by right may actually end up being a little bit better in some strange way, or we'll have another cluster option to look at in the future. We can't negotiate terms from this table in a cluster discussion. That's not what this is about. This isn't a PUD, so I don't think it's wise to talk about what we like better or what we wouldn't, but I think that's where I'm at. So with that, I'll call for the vote from Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Baker?
No.
Councilmember Abraham?
No.
Councilmember Brooks?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Krenga?
No.
Councilmember Erickson Galt?
No.
Councilmember Hamilton?
No.
Councilmember Hoderick?
No.
Motion fails. Thank you for your time this evening, gentlemen. That concludes public hearings this evening. In light of the expected comment and discussion in the next section, I'm going to ask for a 5-minute recess. Thank you. We'll be back.
Can I ask you?
All right, back on the record. Next up is public comment for items on the agenda from Troy residents and businesses. We have a handful of people signed up this evening. As a reminder, per our rules of procedure, you have 3 minutes. It's not a back and forth session. It's directed to all of us. And then at the end of public comment, we have an opportunity to respond. So first up on the list is Peter Dungeon.
Mayor, City Council, thank you for hearing me. My name is Peter Dungeon. I live at 6004 Elmore in the city of Troy. And the main reason I want to talk to you all tonight is about how did we get here with the Volunteer Firefighter Incentive Program. I'm a retired member, so going forward, whatever plan you guys approve is basically not going to affect me other than the term of retention and recruitment for future firefighters of the city. But we have a long-standing history of trying to improve this plan. Our incentive committee members have been working with city administration for years to fix issues that were not correct. Underfunding, tax issues, unsecured fund. Since I joined the fire department, I've been there, I've retired with 33 years, I've heard the same stories from different incentive committee members. These are their concerns. We have a letter from the city manager in 2018 saying, yes, we hear your concerns, we understand. We're not going to negotiate with you any further. Thank you very much. So much for that spirit of cooperation. This is not new. Maybe new to you folks because you're all new to council, but this issue has been existing in the incentive program for years. And why are we here today? Why are we dealing with this issue now? And I think there are members of city staff that have shortchanged you and not advised you properly on this issue because it is not a new issue. And we in the incentive committee have been trying to fix this for years. So I just want you to think about that when you go into thinking about what you're going to do with future plans and how you vote from here on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dungeon. Appreciate you here tonight. Thank you. Next up is Bill Rhodes.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Bill Rhodes. I am the chairman of the Friends of Troy Seniors, also known as FOTS, a nonprofit, all-volunteer organization with an office at the Troy Community Center. In my position, I am approached by many seniors with concerns about the senior program at the Troy Community Center. Some concerns have caused seniors to go to senior center activities in other communities. Troy is the only community in the surrounding area without a senior center. They go to Clawson, Royal Oak, Madison Heights, and others. They go there for their programs, lower costs, and because they feel more welcome there than in Troy. Some people have told me they feel the community center does not want seniors. They are not leaving because the other communities have better facilities, but because they feel wanted there. For 13 years, FOTS has been working to develop a robust set of programs for seniors at the community center. The upcoming Spring Fling and Ice Cream Social are examples and will draw good crowds, but too many programs have been axed. The Punch Card program for senior exercise classes, the Brunch and Learn speaker program, weekly senior bingo, daytime movies and concerts. And now on the agenda is the discussion of creative endeavors and how to close it and use it for other purposes. We hope some programs will be reinstated in the senior space created with a $250,000 grant from Oakland County. But according to the timetable, the work will not be completed until the summer of 2024 and will only replace the speaker and movie programs, if that. All the programs I have mentioned were in place prior to COVID and in the current facility. Also, the grant is targeted at capital improvements, not personnel and programs. People are not going to other cities because they have better facilities. They're going because they feel wanted. I would like to recommend that, one, we change the name of the Troy Community Center to the Troy Community Center and Senior Center. 2, reopen Creative Endeavors Consignment Shop. 3, bring back the brunch card program, Brunch and Learns, bingos and movies. And finally, do away with the $10 club fees. I am sure these requests will not resolve all the issues for everybody, but they will certainly help. And I appreciate your consideration on all of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Good to see you. Next up is Mark Kelly.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a lot of fun. This is the first time for me to be here. So I'm actually on the Oakland County Senior Advisory Council, and I've been to a lot of the meetings with the Friends of Troy Seniors, and Bill is spot on. Guys, you need to start paying attention to this stuff because things aren't happening. Seniors don't know that there's a senior community center, and there's $250,000 there, which isn't going to go directly to these guys, and these guys raise all of their own money and do a lot of wonderful stuff. So you need to think about what's really going on here. I would recommend you bring in a third party, have it evaluated, okay? Don't listen to me, don't listen to Bill, bring in a third party person. And you know what would be great too, is come to our meetings. You would love the way some of the people talk, like, hey, you know, we used to have this sewing and, what was that club? Sewing and?
Quilting.
And quilting. And they would come in with these ladies, 70, 80, 90, that's older than me. And they would come in with 25-pound machines. They would have a buggy with all their stuff, and they're there from 9 to 5. Guess what? Sorry, ladies. We're cutting that down to 4 hours. And, you know, it goes to the highest bidder. You know, not first come, first serve. So, you know, we need to be thinking about stuff like that. And I'd recommend that any of you give me a call. Again, my name's Mark Kelly. I'm on the Oakland County Senior Advisory Council. Give you my work number, 248-502-0805. And I'm open for questions. I know we've got at least another hour. I can answer anything you want.
We can't ask questions now, Mark. Not a back and forth.
Okay, well, I thought that would be just kind of fun. But really, come on, guys, give me a call. Let's do something fantastic for seniors because they are what's really important. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Good to see you. Next up is Roy, is it Ream? Ream.
Thank you, Mayor Baker and Council, for hearing us out today. My name's Roy Rim, volunteer firefighter for the last 4.5 years, and my concern is with the new incentive plan. And it's specifically with the 0 to 10 mark. I think you're really failing the guys coming in. I mean, you're looking at, as of right now, it's showing $75,000 for 10 years of service. All the other, the 10 to 15 year mark is $75,000. The 15 to 20 is $75,000. But your 0 to 10 years, that's when you're putting your most into this. This is when you're going through the academy. This is when you're, you know, leaving your family for 3 days out of the week because you have academy, you have classes to do. You have, you know, 4 chapters a week, 4 tests a week to do. This is where you got to prove yourself to the station. This is where you're, you know, working the hardest, being engaged, you're dedicated. This is where you want to, you know, your guys to see that you want to excel. You know, I don't see why it can't be equal, if not better. This is where you want to bring new guys in to the city. Well, we already had 4 guys drop out of the academy. I mean, if that tells you anything. I just think it's a really low number, and I think you'd do a lot better. And I'd like you to consider it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming tonight. Next up is Ed Ross.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. My name is Ed Ross. I've lived in Troy since 2014. I volunteered at Station 5 with Roy since 2019. I'm also on the Recruiting Retention Committee, so while I will push for you to vote no next week, that should come as no surprise. Some of you, your names I recognize from next door and others. From the recruiting problem, like Roy said, we've already started to lose members. We've had members at our station go on leave. We've had participation numbers start to go down at our station and others. There are gaps in this plan. For 3 months, we had no feedback, and after like 3 months, 2 things got changed. The mysterious 24,000 changed to 75. It's random, it's low, I mean, it's insulting. It doesn't match any of the other gaps. And then we've created, instead of having an incentive to stay on another month or another year, we've now created gaps between 10 and 15 years, 15 and 20 years. So if I quit at 14, for some reason, my daughter gets sick, I have to move, something like that. Those 4 years don't count for anything. And so instead of seeing random numbers of people slowly drift off as we get new people to come in, you're going to start seeing huge cliffs of people leaving all at the same time. We have a recruitment problem already before any of this. Retention wasn't an issue until this. So I implore you to make changes. I don't understand why we're using this new draft plan as a basis. I think there's tons of other ideas. I did tons of research, cursory research in the last 2 days, and there's 45 different plans, 45 different departments who are all doing it something different and all light years better than what you guys have presented. I think it's a disservice to you as a council to have such a terrible idea presented to you as something that is a good thing for the city. So I'll leave it at that. I do appreciate your time. I know some of you have been kind enough to exchange emails back and forth and things like that. I hope that continues. And thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Good to see you as well. That concludes that I see those on my screen that have signed up. Was there anyone else who had signed up for public comment for items on or not on the agenda? Troy resident, I'm sorry, on the agenda from Troy residents and businesses? Just want to make sure. All right, now's an opportunity for council and city administration to reply and respond. There's a couple ways of handling this. Obviously, there's a report. I think it benefits us to have some discussion now, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Councilmember Hamilton, do you want to?
Yeah, just a
go ahead.
Quick comment. I just asked Mr. Ross if you could share the other plans that you've seen that are out there with council. If you can email it to us, appreciate it. Sure. And it just, the way I see things is whether we adopt a plan in a week or not, that doesn't mean that that's the final plan. I mean, for me, other council members may think differently, but to me, we can always change and amend it and improve it. And our main form of liaison with the firefighters is the Volunteer Incentive Committee. They're the people chosen to represent each station. And so where I stand right now is the current plan presented has the approval of that Volunteer Incentive Committee. And so, I've heard from about 11, I think at the current council, 11 firefighters opposed. And then that I've heard from them, I can't say that that's, the ones that we haven't heard from. But then the committee that is elected and chosen by station members is in support of this plan. So those are the things I'm debating over the next week and as we go. But I asked, please share that info with me. I'm open to whatever else is out there and keep going from here.
Thank you, Councilmember Hamilton. Before we talk about the fire department a little bit more, I actually want to talk about the Friends of Troy Seniors issue, and I'll come back to the fire, because I think there's maybe more to be said there. Bill and Mark, I appreciate you both coming forward. I last saw you at a Friends of Troy Seniors meeting. We talked about some of these things. I have talked a little bit with City Manager Miller about some of those requests, and
I know that they're being pondered. I know Brian Gould also has been involved, certainly. It is very sad to think that our seniors in Troy don't feel wanted here. I think that's a poor, obviously, Ellen always says perception is reality. If that's the perception, then I guess that becomes the reality, and that's very sad. And so I'm trying to figure out, how do we fix that? I don't think it's as easy as making some quick changes to just naming of buildings and such. And certainly, we're a little bit behind on this board. Some of the decisions that have been made in the recreation department, things come to us a little bit differently. Obviously, tonight's got the grant money on there, and so we're getting up to speed on some things, I guess is a fair way of saying it. I'd like to look at all of those things you proposed. I'm certain they're recorded. Provide some kind of update to us, or at least some commentary, probably not by the next meeting, because and we've got the fire department issue ahead of us. But definitely it will be looked at. And I do encourage everyone on council, some of you have been before, but the Friends of Troy Seniors meetings are wonderful meetings to attend. They're obviously during work hours, sometimes that difficult, and they will tell you what they feel and think, so be prepared for that. Bill knows as the leader of that group. But I do think it's important that we look at, there are economic realities in this city that we're all dealing with, and it's going to affect every segment of our population. And we need to be responsible with how we look at those issues. But I think that there might be some things that we can do to maybe fine-tune some of these things and help, because not feeling welcome is absolutely what we're not about. That concept is really difficult to swallow. So I am glad you came forward tonight and put those official comments in the record, and we'll definitely continue to talk about them at this level and at the city management level. And does anybody else on council have any comments specifically to Bill and Mark? Or city administration for that matter, but Councilmember Hoderick?
As a senior, I am feeling like this needs to be on my radar more than it has been, quite frankly. We've had a lot of things coming at us as a council, as an administrative body. And every time I think this is going to be a priority, there's something else that really subsumes, literally stuff keeping us awake at night, if you will. So if seniors are feeling like they haven't been getting attention, it's not because, at least for this senior, that I don't care, because of course I identify with the population greatly, and I've always been proud of the activities that do go on at our community center. So I'm not making excuses. I'm making a public commitment to do better and fit this onto the radar, along with the other challenges that we've been confronting. The city administration is also tasked by us to make decisions that are fiscally responsible. There have been some policies in place that predate this council, frankly, that this council hasn't even had a chance to wrestle down and maybe change up or look at differently. We just have not had that opportunity. Many of the newer members came on, COVID hit, like a day later, it seems like, and you haven't been getting attention because of a lot of things out of a lot of people's control. At the same time, we've been working hard as a city to make sure we're doing everything with integrity and with rules, because we went through that era as well. I think that's all converging. I think this is actually a very timely visit you've paid to the council. And again, I'm saying I'm sorry this hasn't been more on my radar. I've had a couple people bring things up, and it's been my attention. And I am available in the day to go to meetings versus some of my colleagues who, this is a volunteer position essentially, and they do have day jobs. So I should be carving that out, and I commit to do that to help everybody and share that information. And that perception being a reality is very troubling, and it's something we need to be hearing and understanding and addressing. So thank you.
Next meeting's Thursday, April 20th at 1 o'clock. I think that's right, right? All right.
Thursday, April 20th.
Yeah, community center, you know that. Additional comments on the Friends of Troy Seniors? I hope we kind of covered what we're feeling. All right, let's get back to the, I'm assuming there's additional comment on the fire department. Maybe I'm wrong. Any on council? Or city administration for that matter? Well, David spoke, I'll speak. I mean, I have a lot to say on this issue. I've probably, aside from city staff, I think I've spent more time involved in some of these issues than the rest of the council, just by the nature of attending several of all of the incentive committee meetings with city management. And I've talked to a lot of firefighters. Full disclosure, I met with Ed Ross today. I spent over an hour with him. I've spoken with Peter Dungeon Monday night at a Station 2 meeting. And Roy, sorry we haven't had the chance to meet yet, but nice to meet you here, or nice to see you here, and to talk a little bit about these issues. It's this has been the driving issue that the city's faced over the past quarter for sure, and it can't be overstated how much time and energy city staff has put into this, how much our finance team has worked on numbers, how much City Attorney Bloom has worked with outside counsel and herself, and of course City Manager Miller at the helm of all that. I say all that with absolute due respect to them, of course, Chief Hollinger and what he's experienced as the lead of the fire department. I say all that, but I don't want to take away for a minute the impact and emotional impact it's had on our retirees and on our firefighters themselves, because at the end of the day, as much as I care about our city administration, I think that my heart is with the firefighters and the turmoil you've all been put through as a result of this, something you didn't ask for and something that was seemingly thrown upon you at the last minute and has put you in a bit of a tailspin on several things, whether you're a retiree who's now facing the concept of monthly checks being cut or no longer cut and delivered to you, and now you have a lump sum and taxation related to that, or whether you're a vested firefighter who has a number of years in and was looking at, increasing those credits each month essentially so you could have your long-term, although not a pension-style monthly payout, to our unvested members who are serving and working very hard, putting in the extra hours through trainings, through the academy, through all of those things now. Most of you who have said that you didn't join related to this incentive plan, most of you have said that, but once you did learn about it, did depend on it in some respect and how that was going to play out in your life. And yes, it created holidays where you've left your family, nights where I'm sure your spouses are less than thrilled with you because you have another fire training or meeting to go to. And not to mention the safety and risks you put yourself in when you do go to fight a fire or help whatever it is that needs to be helped. So I've struggled more with how this is all played out and the effect it's having on, roughly 140 people who the grand majority live in our city, have kids in our schools, have neighbor. I often say I love our Troy Police Department. They get a lot of attention, but our firefighters pretty much are all Troy residents, and everyone in the neighborhoods knows who they are. Our neighbors know our Troy firefighters, and they're a very, very active and integral part of our community. So it's difficult to see something like this occur. Mr. Dungeon, you mentioned like to look at where this is coming from and why we are here now, and we all have similar questions related to that. We certainly, through some attorney-client privilege stuff, we have different information. I, of course, can't talk about that. There's always been, this plan has been unique from the very beginning. You can ask former city manager Frank Gerstenecker when he was city manager when this plan was, the initial concept was created in 1979. I think today he'd tell you, well, it was always something unique, and it was, something we tried, and we hoped for the best always, and we did what we could. And that concept has continued up until today. well, I shouldn't say till today, up until fairly recently when the IRS did determine that we had to close out this plan. It wasn't properly being handled from a tax standpoint, and we needed to create a new plan. I am, like Councilmember Hamilton said, one of the difficult things for me is when there are 6 incentive committee members who have met consistently with the city and who I talk to on a regular basis have given their approval for this new plan that's going to be before us on April 17th. It's difficult for me to say, all right, the 6 of you that were chosen by your peers to represent you, I'm going to push you aside and actually go with some of the other firefighters have proposed or said. And I don't think that's good process. I don't think that's good for the city. I understand that when you're trying to represent a large group of people, it's almost impossible to get 100% support of anything. And, as politicians, we're often look for like half plus one. That's kind of how we rule things, and that sounds terrible, but that's a political reality. My understanding has been that this new plan is a lot more than half plus one. It's much closer to a great supermajority of, while the firefighters may not like that they have to get rid of the old plan, and they may not love this new plan, they understand that it's the city committing a substantial amount of assets at a time when the city is concerned about its financial well-being as it moves forward with projects. And also, it is something that can be amended, it's something that can be addressed, and that will always be addressed like it has every year it's been in existence up until this point. In a meeting earlier today, I realized this is the 3rd time I've dealt with the VFIP plan and trust in my 8 years on council. Probably same for Ellen and Edna. Yeah, it would be. So it is not all too uncommon to make changes in plans and amendments. Obviously, we are tasked with looking at the overall well-being of the city, and there's going to be disagreements on what that means from a number of levels. Some firefighters may think this is a bad plan for the city. This new plan is a bad plan. I've seen the ads. I get it. Others are going to think, you know what, this is a plan that needs to happen so that there is some stability in the fire department, and if the plan's not great or not perfect, then we have an opportunity to address it and change it, and I'm committed to doing that. I know council is. I know city administration is. I just want to caution anybody, I guess, up here from being the politicizing public safety is really dangerous, and I think we're at risk of doing that in the city right now, and I don't want that to occur. We have a long history of having outstanding public safety in our community, thanks to the firefighters, thanks to our police officers, and of course our contract with Alliance. I don't want the next however long to be focused on, or to make the story out of Troy is they can't get their act together with their fire department. They're putting people at risk. That's extremely dangerous, not just for us, the city as a whole, but also our firefighters. I don't want the firefighters to be put in a position that makes them targets of anything and any kind of outcry from other members of the community, and I think there's a lot of risk at that at this point. I met with Station 2. Some of this is for council as well. I met with Station 2. I was invited by the incentive committee member. I offered that to all of the incentive committee members. Station 2 was the only one that thought it would be a good idea, and I went. And I did ask, all right, let's say we don't vote this plan, and Mr. Dungeon asked the question, tell me what happens if you vote no on the 17th. And I gave some practical considerations, and then I said, that's fine, but what does that mean? What do we want in a new plan then? And no one raised their hand. No one offered any option of what would make it different or better. Tonight, Roy, first time I've heard, all right, unhappy with the 10 years, the payout should be more maybe because there's more sacrifice. And that's the first time I've heard that. I appreciate hearing that input, and I think that's something to think about, obviously. But there seems to be a lot of vote no, don't do it, it's bad, but no one can tell us what would make it better. And I'm not comfortable moving forward with no plan at all. We know we have to terminate the trust on the 17th. That's my understanding of that we have no choice at this point. We've given notice that we're doing it, the IRS, we have to do it. But I can't, from an operational standpoint, and my duty as the mayor of the city, I don't think it's wise for the city of Troy to have no plan for our firefighters at all effective May 1st. I think that's dangerous. It's a bad look for our city. And while it may force people to go back to the table, I'm not certain there'd be any different recommendation or result coming out of it. If we want to talk down the line about drastically changing the concept and something, I appreciate Mr. Ross talking about all the different options, and there probably are different options that could be brought in. I don't think those kind of major changes should be done during an emergency situation, and this is an emergency situation. In January, when the notice went out, 3 months, although it's gone very fast, it was enough time to do what we did to come up with a new plan, and then change that new plan, and then change it again per the incentive committee's recommendations. I don't think it's wise to be making such big overhauls that would drastically change how the program works in that shortened time frame. Does that mean it maybe couldn't be looked at and studied over a certain amount of time when there isn't the essential,
Crisis.
crisis? Yeah, maybe that is a good thing. I think the other thing that I've heard a little bit of, and listen, and all of you know, and maybe some of you don't know in the audience, some of you don't know watching, but there's stuff written online. There are things that are out there. Some of it's misstatements, some of it's partial truths, some of it's outright falsehoods. The difficult thing is we are at a point now where I'm glad we're talking about this openly. I appreciate city administration for putting this memo or this report on, because it's allowed for some more public discussion. I know a lot of it's happened under Open Meeting Act exemptions and closed doors, and that's frustrating. It's been frustrating for us as well, because it means we can't talk openly about some of these things. And I suspect that there will be continued maybe lobbying is too strong of a word, but pressure from some firefighters to vote no. Maybe some in the community will also do that over the next week. But as of today, I think it would be grossly irresponsible for this body to not take the recommendation from the city manager, the city attorney, the chief of the fire department, the 6 volunteer incentive committee members, our CFO, all of his team, a seeming blessing from the IRS. I know that's always questionable, but for us to then say no to that is, I think, an inappropriate thing for us to do. That said, I do expect to continue to hear from firefighters over the next week, and whether some proposed changes or concepts that get brought to my attention or our attention can be, I don't know what can be brought and changed by April 17th, but if there are good ideas that come forward and that can make the fire department or the plan better for the city, better for the firefighters, better for the operational concerns of the chief, then let's absolutely continue to have those discussions. I'm semi-joking with this, but we could make amendments every time we meet if we needed to. I don't think we should, and I don't think we'll have to. But again, I'm committed to making sure that this isn't the last time, April 17th isn't the last time we talk about the firefighter incentive plan. That would be foolish at this point. There's an understanding among all of us from city management, from Chief Hollinger, that this new plan will have to be closely evaluated, and we'll see what operational concerns come from it and how we can deal with that from a financial standpoint on behalf of the city. And my only question, or my only ask to city management right at this moment on that is that we find a way to notify council, or at least come up with a plan or a program onto how we're going to evaluate that, so that we're brought up to speed as quickly as possible. And you may not know the answer yet. Obviously, if there's a mass exodus of firefighters, that's going to be pretty obvious. If there's just bad morale and there's things that we can do to make it better, let's find that out sooner rather than later. And so we can have an opportunity to make the changes as necessary. And if that involves, or it includes involving other firefighters above and beyond the incentive committee members, I'm open to that too. I recognize that the incentive committee members, I know the work that they did over the past 3 months because I sat with them in several meetings. I sat with them on phone calls, in emails, in text messages. I know the work they've done, but I understand that when they were chosen to do what they did, I don't think the expectation was that they were going to be the ones representing the whole firefighters for a creation of a new plan. I know that's a concern. I've heard it from some firefighters. I know that's an issue. So if there's more that needs to be done as we move forward, let's keep having those conversations. I ask that we do it in a constructive way. I appreciate the conversations I've had with you, Pete, with you, Ed, especially today. I think that they've been constructive and I think they've been informative, and I do take all of that to heart. Sorry, I think we have a council rule that says I'm only supposed to speak for 5 minutes, and I violated that on a number of levels. But I think this stuff's important, and I recognize it doesn't, solve maybe any issues tonight. But we do have an obligation, I think, not necessarily to create, like I said, we can't make 100% of the people happy all the time, but we damn well better care. And I know that I care, and I'm trying to figure it out for you guys. And I know everybody up here is, everybody over there, everybody back there. So I hope you hear that tonight, and I'm sure we'll continue talking. I appreciate you coming forward this evening. Okay?
Mayor.
Oh, sure, Ellen. Go ahead.
The mayor never signed up to be the public face of what is one of the biggest crisis situations we've had administratively in the city. That wasn't something we saw coming. He has his ceremonial role. We're all equal votes on this council, all essentially volunteers, and he is the face of the city. That means ribbon cuttings, the state of the city, represents us at key events. As a council colleague, I was very appreciative of him stepping up to be the face of the city and speak to this when this became clear that we were all facing it. And media was paying attention, our firefighters, residents. I want to personally express my disappointment in seeing something start to happen here, which was the very first reason I ever got involved in city activism and ran for council, and that is misinformation and the misuse of, frankly, his image as the face of our city. By a paid-for buy that goes back to an address in Santa Fe. Like, that's not Troy. So I want to be blunt that the division that can create, and I don't know who's involved in it, but if you all do, I want to say bluntly and directly that will cause harm. We are still holding the bags, the senior center, of the harm that misinformation caused 15, 12, 10 years ago. I'm still trying to clean that up and work on it and move forward. There's so many examples of it. And we're at that place where we are doing that. This is something we have taken very, very seriously, all of us, on behalf of the firefighters. And I guess I just want to say publicly to you, we've said it in the hallways, thank you, Mayor, for stepping up and representing us at the incentive committee meetings, to the public. It's been a very difficult task on overtime. He has a day job. He has a family. We're volunteers too. And having really good quality discussions, and I've had many with many firefighters who seem to really understand where we are and want to move forward and do not want the negativity out there. and misinformation out there, because ultimately it affects our city's reputation and our public safety reputation. And all y'all have worked too hard and put too many hours in to have a moment where we just really need to collaborate and work collegially to the best of our ability and imperfectly. We're going to take a first stab at it. We're going to continue to finesse it. You could not have a better team of people trying to do it. These folks surrounding me are brilliantly smart. I'm just stunned by it. We have a CFO that comes to us with private and public sector experience, and he's giving his all. I've looked at them at meetings sometimes and wondered if our finance team has slept, as they've worked on new actuarials to get a better deal for you all, so that we weren't working with the older ones that were a part of the original draft plan. All hands on deck, even for the outside group that was doing the actuarials. It is very important to every single firefighter who even maybe isn't thrilled with the plan to understand that we are doing our best. We have an outside counsel that has sought additional counsel from across the nation for what is a unicorn situation here with our incentive program. I just want to caution folks, do not politicize public safety. Please do not politicize the personnel who deliver those public safety services. You know, I'm not running for election. I'm done. I'm term limited. You might be happy to hear. So I'm saying this because there are things to be political about. Public safety is not one of them, and I actually find it immoral to not be careful about the information that is shared and spread. When it's so complicated, my head spins. And it's taking multiple experts to do right, to do as right as we can. It won't be perfect. That doesn't mean we're done and we can't finesse it from there. I know these people that I'm sitting at the table with. These people, all of staff has been picking up the slack and doing work while it's all hands on deck to address this. The good news is we're going to have a plan that we're not wondering if the IRS is going to come back to us and question it, which has been the wonder since the thing was conceived decades ago. It's always been the low-level worry that maybe that could happen. We are going to start with this and be in a better place. And I really hope that everyone, even those that don't like it, as you have dialogue with us, know that we're here to have that dialogue. But when it starts to get ugly and politicized, that can prevent everything that we all want. And I'm really worried about that. I'm losing sleep about that as much as I've been losing sleep about even the fact that we've had to wrestle that plan down. We're better than that in this city. And I just call on all of us. And, you know, hey, in my past, in my activism days, I could get pretty ugly on social media too. Or inadvertently share something that I found out later wasn't factually accurate. And that's when I started to take a step back and say, this is about running a city, about taking care of 80-some thousand residents, making sure they're safe. Information has to be accurate. Not that I haven't done it myself at different points. So I say it humbly and with my whole heart. I really want the community, and including whoever ties back to an address in Santa Fe, to pause, take a deep breath, and remember we're talking about public safety and human beings that are working as hard as they can. If you're going to put an image of politicians on something, frankly, it needs to be all 7 of us, because he has been representing all 7 of us as called by charter when he's stating an opinion. If you're going to politicize an image of one of the politicians, It should be a group picture. Personally, that's my opinion. Honestly, I don't need to be on any flyer being beat up at all, but if you really feel the need to do that, it really correctly, factually, should be all 7 of us, and not just the mayor. I needed to get that off my chest. If we're going to put things on the public record, I feel really, and I say this with all love in my heart, and absolute respect for every single firefighter and the service you provide, the training you go through. I'm gobsmacked and overwhelmed by what y'all do. I wish I could do it. I'd love to be in one of the stations. I always say, I wish I had it to be a firefighter. We're trying to have your backs to the best of our ability. And I say wholeheartedly, that's what I have witnessed. And I don't think you could have a better administration and council striving to do it on your behalves. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hoderick. Anyone else? All right. That concludes City Council, City Administration response and reply to public comment for items on the agenda from Troy residents and businesses. There are no postponed items, so at 10:24 we'll get on to regular business tonight. First up, I-1 Board and Committee appointments. There are no mayoral appointments or council appointments this evening, so we move on to I-2 Board and Committee nominations. I'm not going to make any mayoral nominations this evening, but I understand there are a couple city council nominations to be made by Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Crenga.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, there's several. Start with Animal Control Appeal Board. I'd like to move the nomination of Nehar Abdullah to the Animal Control Appeal Board for the unexpired term expiring September 30th, 2020.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Crenga, supported by Councilmember Hamilton, that we approve the nomination of Neha Abdullah for the unexpired term, to the Animal Control Board for the unexpired term expiring September 30th, 2024. Any discussion? Vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Crenga?
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes, motion carries.
Charter Revision Committee. I'd like to move the renomination of Frank Hawrylak and the nomination of David Fukuzawa to the Charter Revision Committee for the terms expiring April 30th, 2020.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Crenga, supported by Councilmember Hoderick, that we approve the nominations of Frank Hawrylak and David Fukuzawa to the Charter Revision Committee for the terms expiring April 30th, 2026. Any discussion? Vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Crenga?
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Zoning Board of Appeals. I'd like to move the renominations of Michael Bosenbrook and James McCauley to the Zoning Board of Appeals for the terms expiring April 30th, 2020.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Crenga, supported by Councilmember Erickson Galt, that we approve the renominations of Michael Bosenbrook and James McCauley to the Zoning Board of Appeals for the terms expiring April 30th, 2026. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Crenga?
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Motion carries. Well, that concludes council, board, and committee nominations. Next up is I3, a request for closed session. I'll move be it resolved that Troy City Council shall meet in closed session as permitted by MCL 15.268H, MCL 15.243G, as printed in the agenda packet.
Support.
Moved by the chair, supported by Councilmember Hamilton, that we approve I3 request for closed session as read into the record and printed in the agenda packet. Any discussion? Vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Erickson Galt?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Crenga?
Yes.
Motion carries. At the conclusion of the public agenda, we'll recess from here and pick up back in closed session, where I presume that we will. Next up is I4, Oakland County Senior Centers Matching Grant Program. That'll be introduced by our Recreation Director, Brian Gould.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The item before you is requesting approval of an interlocal agreement between the City of Troy and the Board of Commissioners of the County of Oakland for the Senior Centers Matching Grant Program in the amount of $250,000 at an estimated cost to the City of Troy of $250,000 for updates to the Troy Community Center dining room and the outdoor bocce and shuffleboard courts at the community center. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Thanks, Brian. Questions from council? Yeah, Alan?
You want me to move?
Oh, sure.
I'll move I-4 Oakland County Senior Centers Matching Grant Program as printed in the agenda packet.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember Hoderick, supported by Councilmember Erickson Galt, that we approve I-4 Oakland County Senior Centers Matching Grant Program as printed. Discussion. Councilmember Hamilton.
I just want to thank Mr. Rhodes and Mr. Kelly for staying with us on this late night on this item. Or I don't know, or maybe Mr. Kelly's gone, but Mr. Rhodes is here.
I thank Bill,
Yeah. Thanks for staying here tonight and speaking out on this item. We appreciate it. Look forward to working together on improving our senior programs.
Any other discussion? All right, the vote, Ms. Dixon?
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Craig?
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt?
Yes.
Motion carries. Next up is I-5, a request for salary increases. It'll be introduced by me. They're not our salaries, let's just be clear. As required by city manager and city attorney's contracts and our policies, we've had a thorough personnel evaluation of both of them. And they were favorable, and as such, I'll move I-5 request for salary increases. Resolved that as a result of a favorable personnel evaluation, the city manager's salary shall be increased 3.5% effective July 1, 2023. And resolved that as a result of a favorable personnel evaluation, the city attorney's salary shall be increased 3.5% effective July 1st, 2023.
Support.
Moved by the chair, supported by Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Craig, that we approve I-5 request for salary increases as read into the record. Any discussion? I'll just add that 3.5% is commensurate with the all exempt and classified employees that's proposed in the budget for them as well. The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Craig?
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Motion carries. Next up is I-6, Budget Amendment and Standard Purchasing Resolution 5, approval to expend budgeted funds, natural gas utility installation at Bowling, Princeton, Firefighters, J.C., and Raintree Parks. That'll be introduced by Dennis Trantham, our Facility and Grounds Operations Manager.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you tonight is a request for a budget amendment and approval to expend capital funds. A lot of what we do in the parks is driven by the 5-year Parks and Recreation Master Plan. One of the things that came out of that plan was a desire for the community to have winter recreation opportunities. Fast forward to a pandemic and people wanted to be outside even more. They didn't care what the temperature was. So we did a trial run in some of our smaller restrooms where we were able to use electric heat to heat those, and it's turned out pretty favorably. So tonight before you is a request for a budget amendment to add gas furnaces to our 5 community parks. We do have enough funds in the budget to cover the installation. We don't have the additional funds for a contingency should something arise. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Dennis. Any questions from council? Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Craig.
I'll move I-6, Budget Amendment and Standard Purchasing Resolution 5, approval to expend budgeted funds, natural gas utility installation at Bullen, Princeton, Firefighters, J.C., and Raintree Parks, as printed in the agenda packet.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Craig, supported by Councilmember Erickson Galt, that we approve I-6 Budget Amendment and Standard Purchasing Resolution 5, approval to expend budgeted funds, natural gas utility installation at Bullen, Princeton, Firefighters, J.C., and Raintree Parks, as printed in the agenda packet. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Craig?
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Motion carries. Next up is I-7, Budget Amendment and Standard Purchasing Resolution 4, Omnia Partners Cooperative Purchasing Contract, Troy Public Library Access Control Identification Badge Readers. That'll be introduced by Phil Quick, our Assistant Library Director.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before COVID began, the library installed identification badge readers on many of the staff areas and private offices to help ensure employee and public safety during these times. Over the last 3 years, certainly that concern about public safety and staff safety has increased. The library's also changed around some offices during that time. So at this point, we're wishing to purchase 11 additional access card readers for the remaining individual offices and staff areas in the library. We're coming to you with a budget amendment because some of this work was going to be done in the youth renovation, and since that was tabled, we're now proceeding with the project and doing it for the remaining part of the building, including the youth area. Any questions?
Any questions? Councilmember Hamilton, sorry.
I can move the resolution if you're ready.
You both look-
I'll move I-7, Budget Amendment and Standard Purchasing Resolution 4, Omnia Partners Cooperative Purchasing Contract, Troy Public Library Access Control Identification Badge Readers as printed in the agenda packet.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember Hamilton, supported by Councilmember Erickson Galt, that we approve I-7 Budget Amendment and Standard Purchasing Resolution 4, Omnia Partners Cooperative Purchasing Contract, Troy Public Library Access Control Identification Badge Readers as printed. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Krenga?
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes, motion carries. I-8 is Budget Amendment and Standard Purchasing Resolution 4, Oakland County Cooperative Purchasing Contract, Troy Public Library Skylight Repair. Welcome back, Phil.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The Troy Library has approximately 100 skylights. With the recent storms this spring and last fall and winter, and with the increasing rain and windstorms that we have, the skylights have begun to leak again. We're concerned about the environment for the staff and the public, but mostly for the environment of the collection, which is usually under most of the skylights. So at this point, we're requesting a budget amendment to pay for additional additional repair of the skylights and the joint controls. Any questions?
Any questions? Councilmember Erickson Galt, you got this one.
I got this one. Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move I-8, Budget Amendment and Standard Purchasing Resolution 4, Oakland County Cooperative Purchasing Contract, Troy Public Library Skylight Repair, as printed in the agenda.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember Erickson Galt, supported by Councilmember Brooks, that we approve I-8 Budget Amendment and Standard Purchasing Resolution 4, Oakland County Cooperative Purchasing Contract, Troy Public Library Skylight Repair, as printed in the agenda packet. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Krenga?
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Motion carries. That concludes regular business this evening. Next up is the consent agenda. Does anyone on council like to pull a consent agenda item for further discussion? Councilmember Abraham.
I'd like to move all items on the consent agenda as printed.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember Abraham, supported by Councilmember Erickson Galt, that we approve all items on the consent agenda as printed in the agenda packet. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Krenga?
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Motion carries. If you're here on an item for the consent agenda, all items have been approved. There are no memorandums and future council agenda items to announce. There is nobody signed up for public comment for items not on the agenda from Troy residents and businesses, so no need for reply. We have no council referrals this evening. We move on to the reports. There are several reports. We've spoken quite a bit about one of them. Did anybody else have any commentary or discussion on the other reports? All right. That takes us to council comments. Commented out, huh? We announced the MDOT meeting tomorrow evening at the community center. That was on my list. I knew you weren't. Go ahead, Councilmember Hoderick.
Speaking of public safety and the importance, this is National Dispatchers Week. I don't know if I have the technical name right, but I've watched the fire and the police social media lifting up that particular team of people who are just outstanding. And, you know, some of the news events we've seen recently, you see interviews with those first responders of the first responders and the calls that they take in a crisis. And it really, really makes you appreciate that work. It's so critical. And so it's good for all of us to think of them, appreciate them, and understand their role and their important role in our city.
Thank you for bringing that up. Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Craig.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I want to go back to the reports. I'm trying to pull it up, but it won't pull up on my screen. But going back to the Recreation Senior Program report, and just after the feedback we got from everything from creative endeavors to other things, I just wonder if we can have further discussion potentially around creative endeavors, or I know there's a plan in this report about it closing down, but I just wonder if there needs to be more dialogue. And I think what I'm also wrestling with that report, again, I can't pull it up, but when I read it earlier, it also had survey input around programming and all that. And I think what I wrestle with is it does sound a little bit different from the feedback we have today. And it's a reminder, I do work during the day, but I'd be happy to take some time and take that time off and come and visit. And I'd like to come. And so I hope we can exchange cards because there's nothing like being in the community and hearing that input. It's one thing to have a survey here, but it's another thing to be able to really hear the thoughts and opinions of everyone. So I wanted to pull that out and didn't want to ignore that there. And thank you for, again, very timely that you're here tonight.
Thank you. And yes, the report's not pulling up for us. It's giving
not
us
coming up.
it's giving us the litigation.
Scroll up. I think
Oh, is it right?
if you scroll up.
You're smarter than me. All right, I've read it, but that's fine. Okay, additional comments? Truly a brief one. We had our first budget study session this evening at 6 o'clock. The city manager's proposed budget for fiscal year 23-24 is on the city's website. I encourage all residents to take a peek at it. It's light reading. The summaries are anyway, but it's good information, and there'll be a public hearing to approve the budget for that fiscal year at the May 8th, was it? Yeah. May 8th City Council meeting. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us, send it to our email, same city manager as well, but take the opportunity to review and become up to speed on what's going on with the budget, which should represent our city's priorities. That concludes council comments this evening. There were 2 people signed up for public comment for items not on the agenda for members of the public outside of Troy, but they have left. We do have a closed session, so I will recess here and pick up in the closed session.